Lucasfilm. Which didn't help my mood because before that I had watched Rising. As much as I enjoy the show and agree with the perspectives of the hosts, I probably shouldn't watch it more than a couple times a week because it does piss me off. And it's just not a good headspace to be in. Anyway, let's see. I guess I will... Actually, I'm going to read something to you first and then I'll start a Zoom call. So the thing that I've been asked to read is a long piece, and I haven't read a single word of it yet. It is here, B. Sidney Smith, On the Loom of Language We Weave Our Perceptions into the Tapestry of Comprehension. And this was sent to me by a longtime friend and supporter of the Sea Realm, and somebody who has offered me a literal, physical hospitality, roof over my head while traveling. Not to mention some fine beer. Socialism and the Green Party. This is from July 4th, 2020. Introduction. And the author is, B. Sidney Smith. Right. Introduction. In the summer of 2016, the Green Party of the United States adopted a platform plank that committed the party to a rejection of both capitalism and state socialism, and to embracing instead an economics based on ecology and decentralization of power, that was characterized as eco-socialist. Subsequently, the Youth Caucus of the GPUS, what is that? Green Party of the United States, right. Subsequently, the Youth Caucus of the Green Party of the United States changed its name to the Young Eco-Socialists. Yes, Caucus. As of this writing, summer of 2020, the GPUS presidential nominee is a professed socialist, Howie Hawkins, who, in fact, previously received the 2020 nomination of the Socialist Party USA and has taken another member of the Socialist Party USA, Angela Walker, as his running mate. Hawkins' success in winning the Green Party nomination is a testament to the comfort with identifying as socialist among a large segment, perhaps the majority, of the Green Party membership. While many members declare that the Green Party now simply is a socialist party, many other members are more reticent, noting that the United States already has a socialist party, in fact more than one, and declaring that the Green Party's roots and fundamental principles are essentially different from those of socialism, even if they are not necessarily incompatible with socialism. In light of the developments outlined above, it is clear that the tension over just how socialist the Green Party can or should be is mounting, and must reach a resolution sooner rather than later. The purpose of this essay is to answer the question, ought the Green Party to be, or be considered to be, a socialist party? Any answer to this question, to be compelling, must take into account not only the tenets of both the Green and the socialist movements, but also the present political, social, historical, and ecological context in which they exist. Before I begin, I need to anticipate certain presumptions. First, I am neither a capitalist nor a socialist, not at least in the common senses in which each of these terms is used. It bears emphasis that it really is possible to reject both. After a century and more of relentless propaganda, most people on both the political left and the political right have internalized a false dichotomy that places capitalism and socialism as the only and necessary poles of economic analysis. Indeed, one of the main impediments to useful political dialectic is that we can scarcely talk about contemporary politics without using the language of a left-right socialist-capitalist paradigm. My own political and economic convictions do not fall neatly anywhere on that spectrum. Second, I will not treat socialism as a monolith that must be embraced or rejected in toto. Socialism, in its fundamental idea, is straightforward enough. It can be stated simply as the moral principle that those engaged in a productive enterprise ought to have ownership in that enterprise. That is, that they ought to retain the privilege of deciding the nature and conduct of the enterprise and the distribution of its costs and rewards within the community. In this respect, socialism is simply a word for economic democracy, an ideal that Greens have long espoused. Generally, however, people take the word socialism as meaning rather more than simply the democratic principle extended to business. Socialist economics is a sophisticated economic theory developed by Karl Marx and his many associates and successors working within the European philosophical tradition. It is a theory founded on a materialist analysis of the nature of ownership, of value, and of social and economic relations, and it posts all of modern history as a class struggle that must ultimately be won by an egalitarian worker class. Socialism therefore entails certain philosophical commitments as well as ethical ones, commitments, moreover, that have very practical consequences. Socialist politics carries the analysis over into the realm of political praxis, historically giving rise to a spectrum of political systems, from authoritarian communist regimes with centrally planned economies to anarcho-syndicalist communes, and even encompassing democratic socialist governments that implement some socialist reforms while nonetheless retaining capitalist economic institutions. Thus, socialism is a word that too readily connotes more than a person usually intends when they use it. For this reason, if the Green Party is to be in any sense a socialist party, the exact senses in which the word applies to it must be thoughtfully, explicitly defined. Finally, to the extent it becomes necessary for me to address capitalism as an economic system, I want to make it very clear what is meant. I do not use the term capitalism to mean free market systems or economic regimes in which employment and production are controlled by some sort of ownership hierarchy. That would be merely to describe all but a very tiny part of human history. Capitalism should be understood, for purposes of this essay, to be a system of economic economics based on the issuance of investment capital, either as credit to be repaid with interest or as shares earning dividends, such that legal ownership of enterprises is always retained by the owners of the investment capital, who derive income from the interests or dividends. This system, the progeny of earlier forms of organized and financed production and trade, came into being after the development of investment banking in the 14th century in Europe and has been the dominant economic system for several centuries. Because capitalism by design requires an unending expansion of monetized value in which money is created as an interest-bearing debt, that is, as a claim on future growth in economic activity, it is fundamentally unsustainable. Capitalism is presently undergoing its final collapse, having come up against absolute and global material limits to any substantive further increases in real economic activity. The Green Party in economics. Economics is the science of economies, where economy refers to the administration of goods and services within a community, be it a small community, such as a household or village, or a city, country, or indeed the globe. An economic theory may be merely descriptive, what is observed to happen, or to some extent prescriptive, what ought to happen, but in either case aims to give an account of the natural and social forces that give rise to and constrain an economy. An economic system is the actual structure and operation of the economy. The four pillars of the Green Party, peace, democracy, social justice, and ecological wisdom, do not in themselves point to any particular economic system, although of course they preclude systems based on conquest, slavery, or ecosystem destruction. Capitalism, as defined in the introduction above, is insupportable because of its demand for endless growth, which violates the principle of ecological wisdom. In contrast, the principle of economic democracy, the socialist idea that the person doing the work should be vested in both the means and the products of their labor, is not only compatible with the four pillars, but arguably demanded by them. Moving to the 10 key values, we find the four pillars restated among individual values, including an explicit statement about economics, that it be community-based. This value does not so much specify the nature of economic relations as their scale. It suggests that economic institutions should be of a size and type that fits the communities within which economic activity occurs. This is weak guidance, given that economic activity occurs at every scale. Many commodities, fossil fuels for instance, and other industrial feedstocks like ores and minerals, are necessarily traded globally. The intent of the community-based value is that economic activity be constrained to the smallest scale that makes sense in any given case. That food, for instance, should be locally or at least bioregionally cultivated and consumed. That in general, economic activity should be diverse and decentralized. This value also suggests that the economic system should serve communities' interests and not vice versa. The platform of the Green Party expands on this in planks that were adopted at various times and which are not, in consequence, completely internally consistent. However, taken together, they sketch many features of a green economy. That economy must first of all be sustainable, must be in harmony with the natural world, and must be just and democratic. Enterprises should support and be accountable to a healthy community. Consumption should be restrained. Workplaces should be democratically organized. There is an emphasis throughout on situating economic activity within the ecosystem, with calls for closed-loop production, 100% recycling, minimizing toxins, and so on. As regards an actual economic system, the platform suggests a flexible, localized mix of institutional types, including privately owned businesses, public works, communal enterprises, and alternative economic structures. The plank adopted in 2016 calls for enterprises to be democratically owned and operated by those who do the work, a phrase held to be definitive of green economics by those lifting the eco-socialism banner. Additional planks include the abolition of the Federal Reserve System and a return to fiat currency, to be spent rather than loaned into existence as new capital. Public banking, full employment, living wages, and a universal basic income, ending corporate personhood, progressive taxation, support for local economies and small businesses, and, of course, a dramatic reduction in spending on the military-industrial security complex. Clearly, however, the platform planks on economics remain more a collection of progressive desiderata. How do you pronounce that? Desiderata. You know what? Let's get the machines to pronounce that word.
Desiderata.
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 Desiderata. All right. And before I go back to it, who's in the chat? Parker! Does that definition of capitalism involving investment capital really necessitate endless growth? That's a good question. That is a good question. Restream says, congratulations, you've received 100 messages today with Restream chat. I don't see how that's possible. I count 3 messages, one of which is just a question mark. So, all right, Parker, keep your questions in mind. I'm going to hit refresh on this chat. Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm going to leave it as it is. All right, where is the essay? Here it is. Let me move it over to the far end of my tabs. Come on now. Find a place. You can do it. There we go. Clearly, however, the platform planks on economics remain more a collection of progressive desiderata than the components of a single vision. Apart from the primacy of ecological and social justice considerations, the economic platform of the Green Party is devoid of any theoretical foundation. That is, the Green Party remains without a unified economic theory to explain how or why the economic system it outlines will actually work. It is in this vacuum that green Marxist sensibility is beginning to fill with its materialism, historicism, class analysis, and promise of a techno-utopia in tow. This absence of economic theory is a gross defect in the political identity of the Green Party. Politics is often defined as a social process that determines who gets what, when, and how. For this reason, economic and political ideologies are inextricable. It follows that without an economic theory worthy of the name, the Green Party cannot offer a fully mature political vision. The political foundations of the Green Party are perhaps best exposited by John Rensenbrink, one of the founders of the Green Movement in the United States. In his 2017 masterwork, Ecological Politics, Rensenbrink traces the historical developments that led to the present political, social, and environmental crises and lays out a compelling case for a new kind of politics based on communalism and ecological wisdom rather than on competition and economic exploitation. Concerningly, however, out of 250 pages, the book's chapter on economy is a mere 10 pages, the first of which are spent lionizing the early centuries of capitalism while eliding from its account the early privations capitalism inflicted on the world, such as the enclosure of the European commons and the disestablishment of the populace, colonialism, slavery, and genocide. Rensenbrink condemns the modern tyranny of giant corporations, but without giving an account of the economic forces that created them. He then turns to the question of whether socialism is the answer, gives a short critique, and ends the brief excursion into economics with the conclusion that the ecological economy will be mixed. The Green Movement is a young movement. Some of its earliest activists remain active members. Despite its growth and global reach, it remains institutionally immature. Moreover, the accelerating pace of the collapse of global industrial civilization threatens to overwhelm the capacity of even the most radical thinkers to get a handle on the political moment. Without a more solid foundation, such as may only cohere around a robust theoretical framework, the continuing relevance of the Green Party is a matter of rising doubt. I think that's understating it. The Green Party is utterly irrelevant. Case in point, they got my vote. Socialism's baggage. Socialism as a modern economic theory arose during the decades of rapid industrialization in Western economies, when the newly invented heat engines, particularly the steam engine, made it possible to exploit the extraordinary energy density of fossil fuels, just as assembly line manufacturing technologies dramatically increased the efficiency of their use. However, socialism's roots lay in the previous century's philosophical trends, particularly the works of Hegel, Adam Smith, and John Stuart Mill. Idealism, progressivism, and utilitarianism were dominant ideas of the time among European thinkers and heavily influenced both Marx and Engels, whose own philosophical and economic theses were developed as an extension and, in some degrees, as a critique of these ideas. Socialism, in our day, still bears the indelible stamp of Marx's ideological framework. That history is a story of progress, that industrialization, urbanization, rationalism, scientific and technological advances, and increasing efficiency and rates of production are all signs of such progress, that the final step in history's progress will be the elimination of all economic classes except the worker class, that thereafter all people will live freely and in comparative leisure and plenitude in a worldwide workers' utopia, characterized by democracy, common ownership, and the fruits of a rationally designed, technologically advanced industrial system of production. The broad outlines of the socialist worldview have been remarkably stable in light of the splintering of the movement that took place almost before the ink was dry on Das Kapital, into many irreconcilable factions. Although it is fundamental to socialist thought that the end of capitalism and of class conflict are inevitable, that history must culminate in the socialist revolution, it is nonetheless a universal belief of socialists that history needs a little push from revolutionaries to get over the finish line. The devil is in the details. Should the revolution work from within existing political structures, or should it violently overthrow them? Should the socialist economy be organic and localized, or should it be rational and planned? If the economy is to be planned, should the planning be minute and detailed, or only indicate the general direction of macroeconomic sectors? Should there be a central government? How strong should it be? What institutions are needed? And how should they be designed to ensure democratic decision-making is realized at all levels of the economy? More than a century of real-world political experiments in socialism have shown that none of these questions has an easy answer. Virtually every purely socialist state became authoritarian, at least, and some, like the historically most significant case of the USSR, were totalitarian. Virtually every purely socialist state became authoritarian, at least, and some, like the historically most significant case of the USSR, were totalitarian. Most have failed to realize the goal of economic prosperity or equality, although Cuba has done remarkably well in light of the economic warfare waged against it by the United States for over 60 years. On the other hand, socialist reforms in countries that are not purely socialist can be credited with greatly improving the lives of the working class and with increasing social equity. But the fact remains that socialism is now something of a hard sell. Even laying aside a century of propaganda demonizing socialism, it has few real-world successes to point to in trying to convince today's working class of its promise. Despite its growing appeal among the young and among the swelling members of the economically disenfranchised, even the watered-down democratic socialism of Bernie Sanders wasn't popular enough to overcome broad skepticism, much less entrenched political opposition, even after 12 years of steep decline in most Americans' real wealth amid the compounding failures of global capitalism. Given its very considerable historical and ideological baggage, it is not unreasonable to suspect that the present revival of socialism may have more to do with the lack of other, more attractive alternatives to the evident calamity of capitalism than with its intrinsic appeal. It's the energy, stupid. James Carville's famous remark about politics, "It's the economy, stupid," begs the question, what is the economy? An economic theory must begin with the answer to that question, with an organizing principle, that is, which can be used to explicate all the rest. Capitalism has the exchange theory of value, which says that a product or service is worth what a buyer will pay for it. On this principle is built the edifice of free market, laissez-faire economics, which posits that free and independent people will, through rational self-interest, tend to act in a way that maximizes the efficiency and fairness of the marketplace. Socialism, by contrast, has the labor theory of value, which says that a product or service is worth whatever amount of labor is generally required to produce it. On this principle hangs the socialist critique of capitalism, that the capitalist extracts a profit by denying the worker just compensation for the full value of their work. This exploitation is what the socialist revolution is called upon to redress. Neither the capitalists' nor the socialists' theory of value is satisfactory. The exchange theory of value conflates value with price, which leads to the curious phenomenon of the value of a thing varying capriciously, one day extremely dear, the next almost worthless, and the next dear again. Under this conception, nothing has intrinsic value. The price of a single barrel of crude oil has varied in just the last several months from a high of around $60 to a low of negative $37. That's right, the price was really negative at one point, as the catastrophic drop in demand when the pandemic hit left nowhere to store more oil, and producers had to pay to get someone to take their crude. 1,700 kilowatt hours worth of energy in a barrel of oil can be used to perform as much physical work as would take a typical human being more than 11 years to perform, working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, with a little vacation time thrown in. This bears emphasis. The value to the economy of a barrel of oil is an amount of work that is equivalent to 11 years of human labor. Supposing a minimum wage of $15 per hour, that is more than $330,000 worth of work. That is the actual value of a barrel of oil to the economy. Clearly, then, the exchange theory of value, while perhaps well suited to the trading of abstract financial instruments, is an absurd basis on which to analyze the real economy. The socialist also misconstrues value by confusing it not with price, but with time. This error has its roots in Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations. Block quote, "If among a nation of hunters, for example, it usually costs twice the labor to kill a beaver which it does to kill a deer, one beaver should naturally exchange or be worth 2 deer. It is natural that what is usually the produce of 2 days or 2 hours' labor should be worth double of what is usually the produce of 1 day's or 1 hour's labor." End block quote. The reason this is an error is because in either case, beaver or deer, it is the energy the hunter must expend that determines the cost, to her, of the hunt. Her energy does not come from within her, but must be acquired. It is exogenous. When the only energy expended is the physical and mental effort of the laborer, then the exogenous source of energy is food. When, as in all modern production, the efforts of the laborer are leveraged by machinery, the exogenous source of energy is electricity or liquid fuels, with a comparatively tiny fraction of the energy coming from the food the laborer herself eats. To illustrate this, suppose I wish to pay a fellow to use my pickup truck to deliver a box weighing 200 kilograms to an address 10 miles away. Assuming highway speeds, he should be able to perform this chore in less than half an hour. If I pay him $20, that's pretty good pay for a short and not very tiring task. The fuel the truck will use is a gallon of gasoline, which costs less than $2 presently, and weighing only about 6 pounds. That fuel will power my truck 20 miles down the road and back in 20 minutes. So, is the value of his service really measured by his time? What if there were no gasoline? How long would it take my delivery guy to push my truck 20 miles? The fact is that the service he performs for his $20 is mostly performed not by him, but by the gasoline. It is the fuel that does the work. Of course, he wouldn't push the truck. He'd load the box on a wagon. But he can't really pull that either. The load is too heavy and the distance too great. So now he needs an animal, or two, with harness and tackle, and the job is going to take pretty much all day. The real cost of the job is still the exogenous energy needed, in this case his food and that of his draft horses. The essential point is that, whether by modern truck or old-fashioned horse cart, the value of the work is measured by the amount of energy required to perform the task. Moreover, the speed with which the work is performed is determined by the energy density of the energy source. Horses burn hay, which is not nearly as energy dense as gasoline. There's less than 1,000 calories in a pound of hay, and more than 5,000 calories in a pound of gasoline. This is why it takes the horses and driver all day to do what it takes the same driver with my pickup truck less than half an hour to accomplish. This is not to say that time is without value. Each of us has a finite number of hours to spend between cradle and grave, and they are precious. If someone wants my time for their own purposes, I would certainly expect them to pay me for it. What is argued here is that time is not a good measure of economic value, because the amount of work performed is a function of the quantity of energy used, and the time a product or service takes generally depends on the quality, i.e. the density, of the energy source. It might also be objected that it is the truck, which is to say the technology, that is the crucial element in this scenario. Without the truck, the gasoline is no help at all in delivering the box. However, the technology doesn't perform the work. In physics, work is defined as force times distance. The truck converts the chemical energy in the gasoline into mechanical energy, that is, force. The truck is an engine connected to wheels, and like all engines, it harnesses an energy source to perform mechanical work. But the amount of work it can perform is always directly proportional to the quantity of energy it consumes. Although both are necessary, it is the energy, and not the technology, that measures the amount of work being done. Additionally, both the truck and the horse cart are themselves embodied energy, because they are the physical result of the application of energy to do work. Analysis has shown that the amount of energy required in the manufacture of a product correlates very strongly with its price. That, in fact, the price of a product will tend towards the price of the energy it embodies. As one study put it, this is because goods are material rearrangements, and humans only rearrange matter with energy transfers. This is general. Every artifact is embodied energy, and consequently, energy measures not only work value, but the value of products too. Try that again. This is general. Every artifact is embodied energy, and consequently, energy measures not only work value, but the value of products too. Look around you. The screen or page on which you read this essay, the chair on which you sit, the clothes you wear, the room that shelters you, and everything in it is the product of energy being applied to perform work to produce each artifact. This was true 1,000 years ago as it is today. What has changed is the amount of energy that can be harnessed by the economy and, crucially, the energy density of the energy sources. Therefore, whether we consider products or services, whether made by automation or by direct human labor, the correct measure of economic value is energy. In view of this, the socialists' labor theory of value is of no better use than the capitalists' exchange theory of value for understanding how the real economy works. Having the right measure of economic value is essential, but it cannot alone provide the depth of analysis of economics that we will require. To reach the answer this essay is meant to provide, it will be necessary to probe a little into the nature of human civilization and into the trajectory of the present one in particular. This will seem like a detour. It is not. Wow, this is a long one. I'm less than halfway done, and it's been 36 minutes. Well, actually, I started 6 minutes late. It's been half an hour. I'll read this until 3, and if I'm not done by then, I'm going to stop. Let's check the chat. Ooh, Long thread from Parker here. I think capitalism as buying and selling or trading things, socialists pile a lot more into the term. I went to a meeting once of the Greens of Virginia. I figured the Green Party was all about environmentalism, but that was only one of a range of issues they were about. I heard the Green Party is a real force in Germany. It does not seem that absurd to me. Market price determination. It has its problems, yes, but it has a logic to it. So many calories in gasoline. I will be sure to cut that out of my diet. It's not that safe in the kitchen anyways. Gasoline should not be part of your diet, Parker, says Ed. All right, back to it. The tragedy of our success. Ecological wisdom, if it means anything, must encompass the knowledge that we are not merely situated in a living world, but that we can only exist, as an integral part of the living world. Further, all living systems are dissipative, including the life-upholstered surface of Earth itself. Useful energy in the form of high-frequency solar radiation strikes the surface, and that same energy is eventually returned to space as dissipated low-frequency heat. But in the interim, life uses it to do work. The work is first of all chemical in nature. Photosynthesis uses the sunlight to combine carbon from the air and hydrogen from water into carbohydrates. The organisms that do this, and all the other organisms too, one way or another, use this chemical energy to maintain themselves, to grow and change, to make the tapestry of terrestrial life. Further, all organisms modify their environment. Every organism does so individually. Social organisms do so collectively. Complexes of different organisms adapted to one another do so communally, and we call the result an ecosystem. When the organisms are sapient, the result is a civilization. Ecosystems and civilizations alike are dissipative systems, using energy to grow and maintain themselves and to modify their environment, producing waste heat in the process. It is the nature of their existence. The only way humans could stop having an impact on the living world would be to no longer exist, but our existence itself is both a product and a feature of the living world. A defining feature of civilizations is that they have an energy capture strategy. It is a commonplace that civilization began with agriculture. Agriculture was the first communal energy capture strategy. Rather than chasing all over the landscape to hunt or gather food, we domesticated the food sources. Instead of spending almost all of the energy we acquired from food on the task of acquiring more food, we could spend some of that energy on physical structures, useful artifacts, and social specialization. The better we got at agriculture, the bigger and more complex our civilizations became. New energy capture strategies were found as well, in the form of machines to harness the kinetic energy of streams and wind. Every fire consumes its fuel source as quickly as it can. Fires are dissipative, converting concentrated forms of energy into heat. Provide a fire with a steady fuel source and it will burn steadily. Provide it with lots of fuel all at once and it will quickly burn hotter and hotter until the fuel is exhausted. Organisms, by analogy with fire, tend to do the same thing. Give a species everything it can use and no competition from rivals or predators, and it will expand exponentially. When this happens, and it often does, the result is called ecological overshoot, and it always ends the same way. The fire dies. The species collapses, sometimes permanently. In the 12,000 years since the last ice age, humans covered every part of the globe, built civilizations, and expanded and contracted in their numbers, not infrequently going into ecological overshoot locally or regionally, dying off, recovering, and continuing. Climate, as often as not, was the most influential factor. In the 1,000 years leading up to the modern period, the climate was especially temperate, and our numbers, by the year 1800 CE, reached 1 billion for the first time. Our social complexity was also at a new maximum, with innovations in administration governance and economic efficiency that permitted a larger than usual segment of the population to devote itself to scientific and technological development. The result was a new energy capture strategy, the heat engine. The result was an explosion. For millennia, people had tinkered with the black ooze that flowed from the ground in places, and it was well known that certain kinds of flinty black rock would burn even longer and hotter than peat or hardwood. But not until the heat engine was invented was it possible to realize the potential of oil, coal, and natural gas as energy sources. Quite suddenly, human civilization had an energy capture strategy that was unprecedented in every respect. One can scarcely overstate how much energy was made available to civilization by this development. Taking oil, coal, and natural gas together, and assuming minimal efficiency of the heat engines in which they were burned, taking oil, coal, and natural gas together, and assuming minimal efficiency of the heat engines in which they were burned, the energy unleashed in the last 200 years represents the amount of work that could be done by 500 billion people, each working full-time for 50 years. It is as if every human born since 1800 benefited every day from the work of dozens of their very own slaves. The fire analogy is apt, but hardly conveys the enormity of the change. Civilization went from a fire burning a steady source of fuel to one having unimaginably vast quantities of gasoline poured on it at once. It literally exploded. The previous steady source of fuel was solar radiation, converted first of all by plants into chemical energy, which was then used directly and indirectly by humans to sustain themselves and their society. The vast wellspring of new energy was also, as it happens, solar in origin. It was the chemical energy accumulated by plant life over 500 million years or so of sunshine that was then sequestered by geological forces and safely locked away in the earth, until humanity found a way to use it, and in an instant went into an ecological overshoot such as life on our planet has never seen, not since the first complex terrestrial ecosystems formed 500 million years ago. The graph below shows how closely the increases in our energy use and of our population correlated. Source, Penn State University, College of Earth and Mineral Sciences, Creative Commons license. All right, here we go. Let's see. Energy consumption and population in billions. All right. The impact of the heat engine on human civilization has unfolded over nearly 3 centuries, which seems like a long time in human terms, but in the context of ecosystems that take thousands of years to establish themselves, it is the blink of an eye. One way of measuring the impact of ecosystems is by measuring the proportion of nature's production that humans have appropriated for their own use. The productive capacity of nature can be measured. It is the weight of carbon that is converted from atmospheric CO2 into organic matter each year. This is called net primary production, or NPP. The amount of it that is co-opted by humans has risen on the same curve as our energy use and population growth, and now represents more than 1/4 of all terrestrial NPP, and over 80% of NPP in agricultural regions. In other words, in the parts of the world that are fertile and temperate enough to grow food, humans take more than 4/5 of all that nature produces. This is extreme ecological overshoot, and it cannot be sustained even in the very near term. It is not the purpose of this essay to review in any detail the consequences of our ecological overshoot. Those consequences are now widely known, especially to Greens. The short of it is that all of Earth's ecosystems are in a state of accelerating collapse, and tipping points are being crossed in biodiversity, climate, and the loss of ecosystem services from which the biosphere will not fully recover for several million years at least. Even if humanity were to disappear completely tomorrow, the asteroid impact that extinguished the dinosaurs was scarcely more destructive or more sudden. The reason overshoot is reviewed here is to expose a conceptual failing shared by many Greens and almost all socialists, a failing that directly impacts the question this essay is meant to answer. Ironically, it is a failure of ecological wisdom. Greens, generally, when they review the horrors our species has visited and still visits on the living world, rightly declare that the principle of ecological wisdom would dictate that we stop causing such harm, for our own sake no less than for the sake of other living things. The subtext of such a declaration is the assumption, usually left unstated, that people, all people, can, if they so choose, adjust their behavior in such a way as to cease causing harm, to live in balance with nature. Socialists are not without their own ecological principles. Marx recognized that nature provides the physical basis of all human production, and included the unsustainable and acquisitive exploitation of nature's productive capacity among his critiques of capitalism. But the socialist, even more so than the green, is committed to the presumption that the harm we cause to the natural world is solely the result of deliberate choices by those in power. Indeed, most contemporary socialists, reviewing the facts of our ecological overshoot, declare that it is entirely a consequence of capitalism, and that under a socialist order, our overshoot would no longer even exist as such. Some even insist that another 25% increase to 10 billion humans is not too many for the planet to support in comfort and prosperity, not only for humanity, but for nature too. In short, Greens and socialists alike look upon the frightful outcome of industrial civilization as tragic, but only in the modern sense, as something that might so easily have been avoided if only we'd made better choices. This is insupportable. Our story is not merely tragic, but a tragedy in the original Greek sense of that term, in which the downfall of the hero is no mere matter of choices or chance, but is predestined by the hero's own tragic flaw. The failure to understand this is a failure in ecological wisdom, as it will now be my purpose to show. There is no script. Complex systems may be designed, but most are not. The ones that are designed are limited in their complexity by the capacities of their designers. These include computer systems, political systems, and business organizations, among many others. In contrast, complex systems that are not designed are limited in their complexity only by the quantity and quality of energy available to them. Systems in this category include the evolving organisms of life itself, as well as the ecosystems, social systems, and civilizations that the organisms collectively give rise to. That a complex system could exist without being rationally designed is difficult for the human mind to accept. The mythologies of the world, from prehistoric animism right through the major religions to today's pervasive scientism, are each, in their own way, an expression of the difficulty of conceiving of a complexity for which no plan exists. Before the 20th century, there was no theoretical paradigm that could account for such a thing. Now, though, we have a science of complexity rooted in mathematical and computational laws that are reasonably well understood. But what they show is that not only does a blueprint for any given naturally arising complex system not exist, but one cannot exist, even in principle. A standard example is that of an ant colony. Ant colonies are highly organized, with each ant occupying one of several roles in the colony: foragers, workers, nurses, soldiers, drones, and the queen. In addition to collecting food and nursing larvae, the ants can display complex, coordinated behaviors such as raiding other ant colonies, responding to threats to the colony by fighting invaders, moving eggs and larvae to safety, and repairing damage to the nest. Some species even herd and milk aphids, or interact with in similarly remarkable ways with other organisms. However, no ant carries within its brain or other organ the master plan for an ant colony, not even the queen. No such plan exists. Instead, the colony arises spontaneously out of the behaviors of the individual ants and the interactions that take place between them, as each responds both to stimuli in its environment and to the signals, mostly chemical in nature, from other ants. It is commonplace for people to say that the colony has a hive mind or a supermind, but these terms are strictly metaphorical. There is no singular consciousness, no scheme, no general set of instructions. The colony is simply self-organizing and is said to be an emergent property of the ants themselves. Similarly, as ecological succession builds an ecosystem, the individual species within the system adapt and evolve into a cooperative whole until, in the climax state of the system, the interadapted species of plants and animals collectively maximize their use of the available energy and resources. The mature and stable ecosystem is an emergent property of the organisms that constitute it. No single species or group of species controls or directs the system. It just happens. Nevertheless, each species depends on the continued functioning of this whole system in order to survive, in order to thrive. Let's read that again. No single species or group of species controls or directs the system. It just happens. Nevertheless, each species depends on the continued functioning of the whole system in order to thrive. The complexity in these examples arises because ant colonies and ecosystems are dissipative systems. A concentrated source of energy is available in the form of sunlight. As that energy flows through the physical and chemical structures of life, it does work. The work it performs depends on the laws governing the structures through which the energy flows. The structures themselves are altered by the work done by the energy. This is a dynamic process, and the resulting variations in how energy is expressed ultimately result in the complexities we observe. This is not a process that may or may not occur, but one that must occur as a matter of physical law. The next paragraph outlines the physics, but it can be skipped without losing the thread of the argument. An energy gradient, that is, the existence within a system of an energy source of significantly greater density than the ambient heat of the system, forces two consequences. First, the density of the energy source must somehow decrease, and the ambient temperature rise, until the energy of the entire system reaches equilibrium. This fact is known as the second law of thermodynamics. Secondly, as the energy flux is released through physical matter, an amount of work must be done on the matter that is proportional to the increase in ambient heat. This is a consequence of the first law of thermodynamics. A dissipative system doesn't just happen to channel a dense energy source to ambient heat, but is actually forced to do so by the energy gradient, and the resulting work is expressed as an increase in complexity. The upshot is that when energy flows through a system, the system is forced to rearrange matter, and therefore to become more complex. The extent to which matter is rearranged and the degree to which complexity increases is proportional to the amount of energy transferred from the dense source to the ambient temperature. Moreover, the speed with which these effects occur is proportional to the difference in density of the energy source and the ambient temperature. Critically, however, the nature of complexity is such that it doesn't arise solely from a mechanistic process. This is because at the root of all physical processes lies a potential for uncertainty, a fundamental chaos that can be realized whenever a system is pushed too far away from equilibrium by an energy gradient. And I added a word there, so let's read that again. This is because at the root of all physical processes lies a potential for uncertainty, a fundamental chaos that can be realized whenever a system is pushed too far from equilibrium by an energy gradient. As physicist and Nobel laureate Ilya Prigogine and philosopher Isabel Stengers put it in their book Order Out of Chaos, begin block quote, every existence above a certain rank has its singular points. The higher the rank, the more of them. At these points, influences whose physical magnitude is too small to be taken account of by a finite being may produce results of the grandest importance. End block quote. Consequently, they note, quote, there is no longer any universally valid law from which the overall behavior of the system can be deduced. Close quote. As noted, this is frustrating. We intuit that every actually occurring physical phenomena should be accessible to our rational analysis. This faith is the foundation of the scientific worldview that is so essential to modern humanity's sense of itself. Nor is it wrong, exactly. We can, indeed, analyze phenomenon and discover the physical laws that explain their behavior. What we cannot do is use that knowledge to predict the evolution of a complex system. This is because one of the physical laws we've discovered, comparatively recently, is a law governing complexity in dynamic systems, which tells us that chaotic behavior occurs in these systems, even, remarkably, in fundamentally simple ones, and that such behavior cannot be analyzed into rules that we can use to predict what the system in question will do. The best that can be achieved is to make projections based on past behavior and our knowledge of any applicable physical laws. However, such projections are necessarily probabilistic. Every conclusion has a likelihood attached to it that never adds up to certainty. Moreover, the probabilities invariably worsen on a steep downward curve as projections are made farther and farther into the future, such that beyond a certain point a projection is no better than a wild guess. That is why the weather, another dissipative system, can be predicted with a useful probability, but never complete certainty, a few days out. But God alone knows what the weather will be in any particular spot on any particular day a month from now. Famously, a butterfly flapping its wings on the other side of the globe could make the difference between sunshine and a hurricane. All right, how we doing? Almost at the 1 hour mark. A little more than halfway through here. Because civilization is a dissipative system, it exhibits irreducible complexity. Civilization can't be scripted. Like the ant colony it resembles, in so many ways, civilization is an emergent property of human society, arising out of the countless daily interactions of 7 billion human beings with one another and with their environment. This fact, integral to ecological wisdom, has urgent implications for both the green movement and socialism. The presumption that we can specify a new design for civilization must now be seen for what it is: an error. We can indeed make changes. We can embark on new policies. We can redesign our political systems and our institutions, but we cannot do so with any rational confidence that what will occur in consequence to these changes, as their effects propagate through the system over time, is going to look like what we intended. It's a bit of a twisted sentence. I'm going to read that again. We can indeed make changes. We can embark on new policies. We can redesign our political systems and our institutions, but we cannot do so with any rational confidence that what will occur in consequence of these changes, as their effects propagate through the system over time, is going to look like what we intended. A beautiful example is furnished by one recent report on traffic density in cities. Between 1993 and 2017, the largest cities in the United States added more than 30,000 new lane miles of roads to relieve traffic congestion. This increase in road capacity was bigger, proportionally, than the increase in these cities' populations in the same period, so it should have resulted in lower traffic density. Yet traffic congestion didn't go down. It increased 144%. Well, anybody who's ever played SimCity knows about that. Spending hundreds of billions of dollars to relieve road congestion perversely caused road congestion to become much worse. With the benefit of hindsight, the effect can be explained, but there was no reasonable way to determine beforehand that this would be the result. Examples like this abound. They are the topics of countless feature articles and many books, and they all point to the same fact: complex systems will not yield to analytical predictions of their behavior. That came out all right the first time, but it's worth repeating. Complex systems will not yield to analytical predictions of their behavior. In fact, it's worse than that. The most complex systems are the most fragile, and their fragility is of a peculiar and frightening kind. Rather than being vulnerable to obvious large-scale disturbances, as one would expect, they generally manage such adverse events well. But small changes, mere tinkering, as it would seem, a tug on a thread, can cascade into a sequence of effects that ends with the system collapsing suddenly and completely. History is rife with examples, and one of the best known is the Roman Empire. The Collapse of Complex Societies by American anthropologist Joseph Tater, 1988, reveals how the cascading crises that caused the empire to collapse in a matter of just a few years after centuries of growth and magnificent institutional and cultural achievements were a direct consequence of the civilization's complexity. This characteristic of complexity means that any tinkering is fraught with peril. The introduction of a benign new policy or the elimination of some minor tradition or institution is freighted with the possibility that it is, this time, the single beat of a butterfly's wings that will sow the seeds of cataclysm. For Greens, the realization that a just and sustainable society cannot be scripted is not fatal. Positive change is not precluded by this understanding. Indeed, it should encourage rather than discourage deep thinking about how to effect both justice and sustainability. For socialists, the matter is more serious. Marx lived and worked in a century in which a mechanistic conception of nature and of human systems was a seemingly settled and scientific certainty. If both nature and human economic relations are reducible to mechanistic principles, then we can design our productive systems and political institutions along strictly rational lines in such a way as to ensure the outcomes we desire. This certitude was foundational to Marx's political and economic program. On this basis were constructed the socialist experiments whose failures littered the 20th century, failures generally all of the same kind. The effort to prescribe a planned human economy resulted in systems of production and distribution that stubbornly refused to work as intended. Hopelessly complicated internal feedbacks, including especially human behavioral responses, made the economies oscillate randomly between lethal shortages and absurd surpluses, exhibiting far less efficiency than the market economies that they were meant to outshine. It was like trying to operate a machine with too many levers. Levers, moreover, each of whose effects would change dramatically and unexpectedly without any discernible reason. What the planners didn't know is that the system behavior they were witnessing was characteristic of inherent and irreducible complexity, and that the resulting chaos was unavoidable in principle. Present-day socialists can often be found expressing the confidence that, with our far greater practical and theoretical knowledge, especially of systems and networks, and with the power of modern computing and maybe even artificial intelligence, that surely a modern planned economy would work far, far better than such efforts did in the past, ensuring a fair and sustainable system of production and distribution. But this is just the same old error dressed up in a new suit. It is still an expression of the mechanistic assumption that the economy must ultimately yield to rational analysis in such a way as to permit its behavior to be predicted and prescribed. But human economic relations are inseparable from all other kinds of human interactions and behaviors, from the aggregate of which emerges a civilization that is irreducibly complex. An ecological wisdom that was actually informed by the up-to-date science that socialists appeal to would recognize the futility of attempting to make human society follow an economic script. Utopianism. Not all socialists are committed to a planned economy, and those that aren't will be less disturbed by the facts explained in the foregoing section. But even anarchist and libertarian socialists share with their more orthodox comrades, and with most Greens, a utopian vision of what human society can and should become. A vision that presupposes a path of enhanced but sustainable material well-being and social progress. The idea that the human story is one of general progress is not limited to socialists. It has the status almost of a modern religion. Of all the feedback I have received on my writings and presentations, the bitterest and most strident always comes from the futurists. A recent comment on the YouTube video of a talk I gave at Virginia Tech read in part, quote, "In 1,000 years, hundreds of trillions of people will be laughing in Dyson Swarm, looking back at doomers like this," close quote. This piety toward the mythos of progress and technological miracle has no place in a conception of the human future that is informed by ecological wisdom. Nevertheless, it can be challenging to remove this bias from one's own vision. John Michael Greer, in his essential book, The Wealth of Nature, Economics as if Survival Mattered, observes that, begin block quote, "The faith in progress has drawn strength from the unquestionable fact that for the last 3 centuries, those who believed in the possibilities of progress have generally been right. There have been some stunning failures, to be sure, but the trajectory that reached its climax with human footprints on the moon makes a potent argument for the claim that technological complexity is cumulative, irreversible, and immune to economic concerns." End block quote. And that reminds me, and I wish it hadn't reminded me, that the Endurance rover is set to begin its 7 minutes of terror in just about 40 minutes. About 50 minutes. But, even though it starts its descent at 3:55 Eastern Time, it'll take 7 minutes to reach the surface. Then, once it's on the surface, it will take the radio signals from the lander 11 minutes to reach Earth. So, it'll be quarter after at the earliest before we know if it has landed safely. Anyway, human history, however, is much older than 3 centuries, and the exceptional trajectory of modern civilization is explained not by any innate tendency toward progress, but rather by a burst in complexity owing to a sudden flux of vast amounts of energy flowing through the system. Stars produce complex chemical elements, life produces complex ecosystems, and humanity produces socially and technologically complex civilizations. Each is an instance of the laws of thermodynamics at work, as explained previously. But there is a catch. For a complex system to maintain itself, it must expend energy on its already existing structure. In the case of civilizations, each new road must be repaved at intervals. Each new machine means a new maintenance regimen. Each new technology requires new specialties, with new educational and professional organizations to support them. Each increase in population means more food is needed, and housing, and clothing, and schools, and hospitals, and services. These metabolic costs increase with each new increase in complexity, and so must eventually consume the total energy flux available. This is the curse of dissipative systems, the Achilles heel of every ecosystem and every civilization that ensures an eventual complexity collapse. In the climax stage of an ecosystem, the use of sunlight and material resources is optimized by the complex of organisms within it. But the result is fragility. Any permanent change in conditions, such as a small shift in climate, makes the system unsustainable on its energy base because it lacks the surplus energy to adopt, and this brings about a collapse in complexity of the system. Because the energy in the form of sunlight is still available, and many organisms survive the collapse, eventually a new ecosystem rises to take the place of the old one. This is called the adaptive cycle, and it explains the plot line of life on Earth and why it is so diverse across time, from dinosaurs to giant mammals to hominids like us. The rise and fall of civilizations in human history is much the same. The collapse of complex societies, Tainter explores this process in great detail. The mythos of inevitable human progress doesn't fit a model of collapse and renewal. On its account, no new dark ages, such as bridge the 7 centuries from the fall of Rome to the full flower of medieval Europe, is in the cards for us. And to be fair, modern civilization is a very different kind of story from past civilizations. Not since the dawn of agriculture has so profound a shift in human dynamics taken place as occurred with our sudden capacity to exploit fossil energy. Our present mastery over nature is profound, whether one measures it by depth of knowledge or by sheer physical impact. Nevertheless, as this essay has been at pains to show, the reason fossil fuel energy was a change in kind and not just a change in degree was because of its extraordinary energy density. The shift from hunter-gatherers to agricultural civilization over a period of thousands of years resulted in energy use per person roughly doubling, whereas the shift to fossil fuel energy resulted in average energy use per person increasing by a factor of 4 in just a few generations, while at the same time our population increased more than 7-fold. In consequence of this, we have built, and arguably couldn't help building, a civilization that now demands that such an amount of energy, and indeed ever more and more, must continue to flow through the system, or it cannot pay its own metabolic freight. There are thus 2 kinds of people among those who think about it. Those who believe we can adapt and modify our energy capture strategies indefinitely to keep industrial civilization going, and those who think we cannot. Those in the optimistic camp include the apostles of techno-utopia, who believe that converting to renewable energy systems, or clean nuclear power, can avert climate catastrophe and continue the march to our grand destiny among the stars. This camp also includes most Greens and socialists, even if their vision has less of the element of futuristic fantasy. Indeed, what is called the Green New Deal is founded on the notion that we can sustain social and material progress by simply switching energy sources to those provided unendingly by the sun and its servants, the wind and the rain. As every enthusiast knows, the sun showers the earth daily with vastly greater amounts of energy than we could ever conceivably use. I disagree with that, but continuing. Suppose for a moment we join in the hymns of the futurists and the Green New Dealers and see what the song entails. The future that is envisioned, at least in the near term, is one of solar panels and dams and windmills and locally sustainable communities with housing and workplaces, of efficient transportation, and of systems of communication and distribution that can sustain a rationally integrated and networked economy functioning at appropriate scales. Necessarily, there will have to be industrial processes to produce the feedstocks these elements of the future will require, including iron and other materials for structures and machinery, copper and other conductors for electricity, silicon and rare earths for integrated circuits, ceramics, lubricants, resins, and so on. Without these materials, civilization necessarily looks more like the 15th century than the 21st. But here we find that something has been overlooked. The sun provides unending energy, but the raw materials needed to capture it, or to capture any energy source at the rate a technological civilization requires, are finite. Indeed, the physical materials are themselves a form of embodied energy, just as fossil fuels are, and subject to the same thermodynamic laws. Consider iron. Iron. Consider iron, a fundamental requirement for any level of technology, even a plowshare. Iron is the most abundant element in the earth, but not in the crust where it can be reached. Also, to be usable, iron ore has to have at least 20% iron content. There are about 80 billion tons of iron in known reserves of usable ore, which at the present rate of iron production will last about 60 years. The Earth is now very well mapped and searched, so discoveries of significant new deposits of iron are unlikely. Of course, iron and steel can be recycled, so it won't vanish. However, with every passing year, some percentage of the iron already smelted is lost to the environment in the form of rust, and this can never again be recovered. Consequently, at some point in the future, almost certainly in the lifetimes of those now living, the amount of usable iron in the world will go into permanent decline and must eventually decline to zero. And something will prevent us from bringing any more in. This is the second law of thermodynamics again, this time applied to the embodied energy of the iron ore. The iron was created in long-dead stars, exploded out into space, and eventually aggregated into our planet, and seemingly our planet alone, and is not to be found anywhere else. Anyway, I'm commenting. The iron was created in long-dead stars, exploded out into space, and eventually aggregated into our planet, where tectonic and chemical forces combined it with the other elements, mostly oxygen and silicon, found in the ore. Humans apply still more energy to it to concentrate it into pig iron and steel, but eventually it must be dissipated back into the environment in a diffuse and unusable form. In an important paper on energy and complexity in 2010, E.J. Chasen wrote, begin block quote, "Technology is a cultural practice that decreases entropy locally by artificially manufacturing complex products, yet only with the expenditure of energy that inevitably increases entropy in the larger environment of raw materials used to make those goods." Close quote. End block quote. With few exceptions, every inorganic material we use is like this. A certain amount is available to us in a usable concentration, but by using it, we ultimately dissipate it. Such essential mineral resources as iron, aluminum, copper, phosphorus, silver, and many more will be exhausted within a matter of decades. Sooner, if we continue to expand their use at present rates of increase. While many of these can be recycled, inevitably, a significant proportion is lost every time it is reused. So the amount available to civilization must finally decline. Moreover, recycling is itself an industrial process that requires energy and materials, and therefore contributes further to environmental entropy. The version of the second law that applies to matter is uselessness always increases. If we succeed in adjusting our energy capture strategies to replace our current rate of fossil energy use with a similar rate of renewable energy use, we ensure the demise of industrial civilization within a generation, maybe two, just on resource depletion alone. All use of energy has this effect. From the point of view of the iron ore, it makes no difference whether the smelter is a coal-fired furnace or an arc furnace using electricity from windmills. The outcome is the same as regards the declining stock of usable iron. The outcome is not the same for the arc of civilization, however. Switching to renewable energy requires retooling industrial civilization from the ground up, with new infrastructure, new manufacturing methods, new machines for every purpose, especially heavy transport. This will demand the expenditure of vast amounts of energy in its own right, and consequently must accelerate resource depletion. If the goal is to maintain our present material standard of living, then far from dodging civilizational collapse, the switch to 100% renewable energy will accelerate it significantly. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is we can't stop. So long as energy is available, we'll use it. That is because our civilization is not scripted, but emergent. Chasen again. Begin block quote. Whenever, wherever, and whenever optimum energy is available, systems capable of drawing power competitively, thereby building structures or functions needed to engage those energies, are favored. Selection from many energy-based choices rewards and nurtures dynamic steady states that create pathways capable of utilizing power per unit mass. Those systems using energy, too little or too slowly, are rejected. End block quote. The use of an energy resource typically rises until it is being used as fast as possible, and then, if the energy source is finite, its rare its rate of use declines with the declining supply until the source is gone. I'm going to read that again. The use of an energy source typically rises until it is being used as fast as possible. And then, if the energy source is finite, its rate of use declines with the declining supply until the source is gone. The peak in the middle is what is referred to by such terms as peak oil. When it comes to fossil energy, we are in that period of peaks. Conventional oil production peaked in the U.S. in 1970, and globally in 2005. Tight oil, oil shale, tar sands peaked in the U.S. and probably globally last year. Coal peaked in the U.S. in 1998, and globally a few years ago. Natural gas will peak within 10 years. The rise and fall for any finite resource follows a trajectory known as the Hubbert curve, after the American geologist who first described it. In the ideal case, the curve is symmetric. If it takes a given number of years to reach peak use, it will take about that many more years to reach depletion. However, the curve for fossil energy is subject to two factors that make the downside of the curve much steeper. That is not because fossil energy is depleted differently than other resources, but because the capacity of civilization to use it becomes increasingly impaired as it declines. The first factor is that it costs energy to extract energy. And in the case of fossil fuels in particular, the cost increases rapidly post-peak. When conventional oil was first used, a shallow well in a good field would produce a gusher with an energy cost of energy, ECOC, of about 1%. That is, it only took one barrel of oil's worth of energy to get 100 barrels of oil from the well. By the time of peak conventional oil in the US, the ECOE had increased to about 4% because the gushers had all been exploited, and new wells had to be deeper and in harder to reach places. Now, new fields of conventional oil have an ECOC of at least 10% and rising fast, because the only reserves left are under the sea or otherwise require very expensive technologies to extract. Tight oil has an ECOE, again that's energy cost of energy, of at least 20%, and generally much higher. A similar story can be told about coal and natural gas. The result of the ever-increasing energy cost of energy, that as our energy resources decline, the net energy available to civilization, what's left after paying the energy cost of extraction, declines at a much faster rate than the energy resources themselves. For this reason alone, the downward slope of the curve for fossil energy must be much steeper than the upward slope. But that isn't the only problem. The second factor is that unless the total energy available to civilization continues to grow, it soon requires all the energy it can get just to meet its own metabolic costs. If the energy supply then begins to decline, even slightly, decay and fragility set in. This is reflected in neglected infrastructure, declining social and economic sectors, and most importantly, a squeeze on the ability to pay for further energy extraction. This is the paradox of peak fossil fuel. Those who first understood peak oil expected the price of oil to rise relentlessly as it became more scarce, but instead the opposite has happened. Although the price has had wild swings, the trend has been steadily downward. The reason is that oil isn't just one commodity among others, it is the commodity, the one from which all other commodities are made. This is a restatement of the principle that energy is the measure of economic value. Consequently, as it becomes scarce, everything becomes more expensive in energy terms, and a crisis of affordability causes monetary deflation as demand is relentlessly suppressed. The consequence for oil producers is that the remaining reserves that are affordable to extract are shrinking at a much faster rate than the resource itself. As the price of oil falls, fields that were previously profitable to exploit cease to be so. Producers are having to write down their assets, and bankruptcies are rising. Industrial civilization is caught in an energy trap. It needs more energy than it has just to extract the energy that it needs. There is no solution for this. Solar and wind energy don't help because despite impressive growth for decades, they still represent a tiny sliver of overall energy use. In particular, they have done nothing to dent the need for liquid fuels for heavy transport and main industry. Also, their energy costs are all up front, and we increasingly can't afford to pay them. That's why, after years of rapid development of government-subsidized wind and solar farms, 2019 saw scores of cancellations of planned projects all over the globe, largely because they weren't affordable. For the first time in more than 1,000 years, humanity faces a general civilization-wide complexity collapse. It has already begun, and it is global. Decline and disruption, rather than growth and progress, will define human economic systems and social institutions going forward. Like any species in overshoot, we are the final victims of our own success. An ecological correction is underway and accelerating rapidly. At this point, reason demands that we put down the hymnals of the futurists and consider our realistic options. The real future. It's not all bad news. Popular entertainment has embedded in people's imaginations the idea that if the system fails, the world will soon look like a post-apocalyptic dystopia. Just because the world represented by Star Trek isn't in our future doesn't mean that the world represented by Mad Max is. Of necessity, complexity collapse will result in a dramatically lower use of fossil fuel, making the worst climate outcomes less likely and reducing our impact on ecosystems. Capitalism has already ceased to be a viable economic system, so nationalization of key economic sectors and some degree of social ownership is a given. Globalization is dead, which means a dire outlook for transnational corporations. Localization of economies and the need to cultivate resilience along with the end of capitalism will tend to counteract the previous century's extreme commodification of popular culture. These are just a few examples of things to look forward to with more optimism than despair. From its beginning, until the late 20th century, industrial civilization was in an anabolic phase, which is to say, it was a period of economic expansion. This was the period during which abundant energy was embodied in increasingly large and complex physical, social, and institutional structures, from high-rises to highways to high schools. We have now entered the catabolic phase, the period when metabolic costs can no longer be met. And so some of the energy in our physical, social, and institutional structures must be continually reclaimed. This can happen constructively, by adapting them to new uses, but in many cases they will simply be abandoned, like the economic disaster zones that Chris Hedges wrote about in his 2012 book, Days of Destruction, Days of Revolt. This process is most likely to unfold in a stair-step fashion with a general decay punctuated by shocks like the 2008 financial crisis and, more dramatically, such as is now occurring with the coronavirus, that force the sudden destruction of businesses, institutions, and communities, while the periods in between provide some measure of stability and even modest recovery. Just as in the anabolic phase of social roles and specializations proliferated, so in the catabolic phase the varieties of employment will become less numerous, as the economy undergoes a delayering and decomplexifying process. Production modes that rely on energy-intensive machinery, layers of management, and far-flung supply chains will gradually lose their advantages over modes that can make use of human labor and modest energy. Production modes that rely on energy-intensive machinery, layers of management, and far-flung supply chains will gradually lose their advantages over modes that can make use of human labor and modest energy, have few managers, and source locally. Rural communities will reintegrate, with general stores that feature local products alongside national brands replacing Walmarts and Dollar Generals, and they will gain population as farming de-industrializes and the need for agricultural laborers increases. Suburbs will either become economically coherent communities or be abandoned. Cities will eventually cease growing and probably shrink, as their efficiencies become less relevant in an era of reduced technology, their density more burdensome, and their opportunities less attractive. Altogether, the economy of the late 21st century will reflect its per capita energy use, which will be closer to that of 1910 than that of 2010. The social and political implications of this economic readjustment are fraught. Just as the extremely rapid expansion of industrial civilization brought about novel social stresses and great social change, its swift contraction will create additional, likely extreme social stresses, with the possibility of sudden shifts in our institutions. The most severe global danger is hunger. The industrial food system is utterly dependent on cheap and abundant liquid fuels, and this fact, together with a steep decline in soil and water resources and growing climate chaos, has stark implications. It is near certainty that famines are going to occur on an unprecedented scale. The food crisis of 2008 was a key factor in the violence that swept Southeast Asia and Northern Africa in the years after. That crisis and its aftermath should be taken as no more than a foretaste of the catastrophes to come. Wars and mass migrations can be expected in many parts of the world. The United States, although it benefits from having a large and diverse continent buffered by oceans, faces a unique challenge because it is experiencing imperial collapse simultaneously with complexity collapse. The United States, although it benefits from having a large and diverse continent buffered by oceans, faces a unique challenge because it is experiencing imperial collapse simultaneously with complexity collapse. The psychology of the American people has been shaped by historical accidents that have privileged them for several centuries. First was the biological luck of the draw that European colonizers had the infectious diseases to which the indigenous inhabitants of the Americas had no immunity. With 90% of the original inhabitants wiped out, the colonists faced only token opposition as they took possession of a vast and rich continent. This advantage meant that the subsequent age of fossil fuel could be an age of relentless expansion, allowing the United States to lay claim economically to the entire hemisphere. When the 20th century brought with it the destruction of the European empires in the conflagrations of two world wars, the United States, with the only industrial economy left undestroyed, was able to assume the position of global hegemon. This was underwritten by the Bretton Woods Agreement, which granted the United States seigniorage, a license to print dollars without fear of inflation, because it was the international reserve currency. When the United States defaulted on its currency in the early 1970s, coincident with the U.S. peak oil, its position of dominance allowed it to switch to the petrodollar system that is still in operation today, enforcing United States control of international finance and its system of rewards and punishments that maintains American hegemony and underwrites its global military occupation. These advantages have permitted Americans to consume at a rate far exceeding their relative numbers, and to be largely immune to the strains and setbacks that most societies have faced during the previous century and a half. In effect, Americans as a people have been the most privileged in history, a state of affairs that has been slowly unraveling for nearly 50 years, and is now so unstable that its final end must follow soon and swiftly as the general complexity collapse unfolds. Because Americans believe that their privilege was earned, American exceptionalism, the cultural and psychological shock of the ongoing, rapid, and permanent decline in their fortunes has undermined their mythos. They can no longer maintain a coherent narrative about who and what they are. This gathering social crisis is visible in the collapse of the political center, as the public polarizes around partisanship, race, and religion. It is visible in the ever more violent divide between the public and the legal system, in the pandemic of mass shootings, in burgeoning suicide, especially among the middle-aged, in exploding rates of homelessness, mental illness, destitution, dependency, and despair. It is visible in the shocking dysfunction of our educational, healthcare, and governmental institutions, and in a financial system that is corrupt beyond measure, preys upon the public, and is completely unmoored from the real economy. America is descending into a mob, seething with misdirected anger, deeply fearful of the future, easily swayed by mindless suppositions and soulless demagogues, indifferent to facts and immune to reason, and marbled through with heavily armed bigots and miscreants drawn to violence and mayhem like flies to shit. So, not playing your cards very close to your chest there on the social level, are you? Like all privileged people faced with inescapable challenges to their privilege, Americans are ensnared by fragility, unable to step back from themselves to make common cause, to recalibrate their expectations, and to rethink their future. Half won't even protect themselves or others during a plague. Ugh, God, he was going well there for a while, but now it's descended into blue tribe bullshit. Anyway, as the economic impact of the present crisis deepens over the course of the next 2 years, the economic tailspin that began in 2008 will gather speed. The international monetary regime the U.S. has ruled for 70 years will likely break under the strain of a general default, and with it the privileged status of U.S. currency. At that point, our overseas bases will quickly have to be withdrawn, and Americans will find themselves paying real-world prices with dollars set to undergo hyperinflation as the trillions of them we've printed and sold around the world since the World War II suddenly lose their value. This outcome may unfold in 2 years or 10, but at this point it is baked in. Okay, I wanted to wait till the end to comment, but do you recall much earlier in this essay where he made a pretty thoroughgoing argument, a convincing argument for saying that in a complex system like the one in which we exist, it is impossible to predict with any certainty what will happen in the distant future, or even just a few months from now. And yet here he is laying out a very detailed timeline of collapse. Anyway, here we go. For these reasons, the near-term situation for the United States is extremely perilous, and it is possible its present institutions won't survive in their current form, or even its geographic unity. At some point, it will be ripe for an authoritarian regime to seize control in a setting of rising social unrest, as history teaches us to expect. These are possibilities, not certainties, but the United States now finds itself on a ledge overlooking a precipice of great height, and it has lost its balance. Green economics. The collapse of industrial civilization is certain, indeed underway, but that is not in itself something to mourn. The collapse of American global society into chaos, however, is worth every effort to try to prevent. When anyone asks, why are you a green, my answer is always some version of, to prevent the looming catastrophe. The reason the Green Party came into existence when it did was to found a political movement in opposition to the systems of violence, oppression, exploitation, and ecological destruction that are the hallmarks, indeed the pillars, of industrial civilization. The 4 Green Party pillars of peace, social justice, democracy, and ecological wisdom were formulated as deliberate counterpoints to those of the dominant political and economic culture. A quarter century later, the Green Party alone offers a political vision that is future-oriented and people-centered, a vision that has significant, if largely unacknowledged, influence on the national political discussion. Now, however, when we are on the cusp of the very crisis Greens foresaw, the Green Party finds itself caught in the maelstrom. Still weak and worryingly fractious, struggling to find solid ground on which to make its stand. This essay has argued that its defects are in part owing to its lack of a cogent account of economics to gird its political framework, and most of the foregoing text was written with the aim of identifying the necessary elements of such an account. The first element of green economics must be the current measures of economic value and activity, and the fundamental measure is now clearly understood to be energy. Whether through machines or people or animals or simply natural processes, the quantity of energy transferred is the measure of the work performed. This understanding requires no abstract defense. It is just physics. The work performed, in turn, is the measure of the transformation of matter, whether into food or goods or housing or some service, or impact on both the human and the natural environment. Our impact on both the human and natural environment is then measured in its turn by the extent to which matter is altered and eventually dissipated. Green economics must therefore reject domestic product as a measure of overall economic activity and replace it with total use of energy. The amount of appropriated net primary production from nature will always and inevitably be the largest portion of the total use of energy, encompassing food first, encompassing food first of all, but also organic materials like structural wood, textile fibers, biomass, organic oils, solvents, chemicals, and so on. The other segments of measured energy use would be of energy captured from inorganic and fossil sources, renewable or otherwise. With energy use as the scale, measurements must be made of the rate at which the stock of non-renewable resources, including mineral resources that are essential to organized human society, are being depleted. Knowing how fast we are drawing down non-renewable resources enables informed decisions about when the use of such resources is truly needed and when it should be foregone, and the resources banked for the use of future generations. Careful measurements must also be made of the impact of human activity on ecosystems, on the climate system, and on important geophysical cycles such as the carbon cycle, the hydrologic cycle, and the nutrient cycle. These too are essential and essentially economic measurements, for only by these measurements can we always ensure that the primary and largest input to the human economy, the global biosystem itself, will continue to sustain us. The second element of green economics is the understanding that the economy is an emergent property of human society, irreducibly complex, and cannot therefore be scripted. Further, as a living system, the economy will tend to ebb and flow, producing new patterns and dropping old ones, reflecting shifting social trends as well as external variables like the climate. In a post-growth economy, such spontaneous changes will usually be more measured and less stressful than in the centuries of crazed growth just behind us. Nevertheless, the controls imposed on the economy by politically determined programs must generally be adaptive rather than prescriptive. Controls intended to optimize the economy will respect to any standard, whether of efficiency or of fairness or of some other standard, must be light and responsive, or else positive feedbacks will quickly defeat the effort and lead to unpredictable economic and social disruptions. I'm going to read that one again. Controls intended to optimize the economy with respect to any standard, whether of efficiency or of fairness or of some other standard, must be light and responsive, or else positive feedbacks will quickly defeat the effort and lead to unpredictable economic and social disruptions. The third element of green economics is the principle that the pursuit of economic growth must inevitably damage the ecological balance on which the economy itself entirely depends. This principle must be understood in light of the fact that growth will always tend to occur in conditions of plenitude. Simply outlawing growth won't work, for the reasons given in the previous paragraph. Instead, political praxis must find ways of Political praxis must find ways to disincentivize growth and redirect excess resources in ways that don't increase total economic activity. The principle against unconstrained growth is really just one aspect of a more encompassing principle that the human story will have an end just as surely as it had a beginning. There is no life without death, because each is only an aspect of a larger unity. The Earth is not done making new species and new ecosystems, and our existence is not a permanent feature of the planet. The timescales on which life's changes are rung span ice ages and the drift and crashing of continents, periods of greater expanse than the human mind can conceive in a manner that is relatable to experience. Our past and our future are part of a comparatively small tapestry, and it is by fashioning the present that we make it whole. In the near term, nonetheless, and for at least the foreseeable future, it is relentless and sometimes rapid degrowth that will characterize the human economy. Population and economic activity alike will be on the decline until some sort of equilibrium is once again reached. The economic challenge of the future is no longer managing growth or limiting its harm, but instead ensuring that the catabolism of degrowth is managed in such a way as to ensure economic and social justice, and preserving as much as possible a viable future for humanity. Unsurprisingly, the existing economic planks of the Green Party platform are already generally consistent with the elements of green economics outlined above, but the platform should be revised in light of the certainty of complexity collapse and effectively permanent economic contraction. Let's try that again. Unsurprisingly, the existing economic planks of the Green Party platform are already generally consistent with the elements of green economics outlined above, but the platform should be revised in light of the certainty of complexity collapse and effectively permanent economic contraction. Such planks as greening the dollar, localization of production, and economic democracy are excellent as they are, but many others subsume an incorrect understanding of economic value or of thermodynamics, or of our condition. Those demanding that the economy eliminate waste or claiming that everything recycles and that closed-loop production is possible need to be rewritten to reflect the understanding that these goals are no more achievable than unburning a match or building a perpetual motion machine. Instead, use of unrecoverable resources should be minimized to bare need wherever possible. Planks that implicitly call for proactive controls like true cost pricing should be revised to reflect the understanding both that true cost, along with all other kinds of purely economic value, is measured by the yardstick of energy, and also that an economy will not yield to productive controls in ways that we can rationally predict. The Green New Deal should remain a core project, but it must not be understood, characterized, or sold as a panacea to replace fossil fuel energy or preserve the present economy. It should be understood as a project to soften our landing from the crash of industrial civilization and to provide a means of working towards sustainable ways to live with a greatly reduced use of energy overall. Such technologies as electronics, advanced medicine, communications, and others that promote physical and social well-being may perhaps be preserved with sufficient capture of energy from the sun, but this will only be possible if the transition is pursued diligently. We must acknowledge that the pace of economic activity is not a matter of the amount of energy available, but of its density, and that there is no means on earth to create a substitute for fossil fuels in this respect. The only way to get concentrated forms of energy in the future is to concentrate it ourselves, using energy that is not yet concentrated while dissipating non-renewable resources in the process. That means a civilization running on an entirely different economic basis than the one we are leaving behind, and it will take centuries to sort itself out completely. In certain respects, the next civilization may well resemble the medieval world as much as the modern one. It need hardly be pointed out that humanity's future looks nothing like the one Marx envisioned. This is not Marx's fault. The framework he had for understanding how the world works was a mechanistic paradigm which the disrupting discoveries of thermodynamics, mathematical complexity, and ecological succession had not yet shattered. But the fact remains that Marxism as such is no longer tenable, either as an economic theory or as a political program. Labor is not the source of economic value. Capitalism is already dead, and neither society nor the human economy can be planned or prescribed. Most importantly, the human story is not one of steady progress characterized by technological advance or scientific and industrial achievement. Instead, human civilization is a naturally occurring dissipative system, and like all such systems, it experiences succession. Civilizations rise out of the ruins of previous civilizations, achieve their climax state, and then undergo collapse and eventual renewal in their turn. While not all civilizations undergo a dramatic fall of Rome-style collapse, all undergo succession one way or another. Our civilization, having burned many times hotter and brighter than any before it, is due for the most dramatic burnout in history. It is not certain that it won't end us. But if it doesn't, the steepness and drama of our decline will nevertheless revoke every conventional expectation. However it pans out in the generations to come, we are like every past civilization in this. We have exhausted our energy capture strategy, and we can no longer pay the band. The socialist idea of the democratic workplace is not only still relevant, but will become more so. In contrast to the last 2 centuries, the economy of even the near future will increasingly favor localized community-scale enterprises. Although there will still be those who aspire to the owner class and to businesses so massive they can bully governments, their programs will cease to be visible. Their programs will cease to be viable because they depend on capitalism to establish and maintain themselves. The diseased fantasy of the capitalist era. Is it diseased or deceased? Deceased. Okay. No, it's diseased. The diseased fantasy of the capitalist era, that great wealth is naturally owing to anyone capable of creating it, is already exploded and will soon be a curiosity of history, like the divine right of kings. In an era of degrowth, the only path to privilege is by hoarding diminishing resources. If we can preserve democratic institutions, such behaviors can easily be dealt with. If our democratic institutions are really and finally lost, then there will come a time for political revolution. A note of caution should be sounded here, however. Most of the progressive reforms we presently celebrate, such as the abolition of slavery, the emancipation of women, the protection of workers and of children from exploitation, and many other social liberties, all occurred well after the advent of the industrial age, during a period of quickly rising material wealth. An era of economic decline, and therefore of declining material wealth, will tend to be an era of social decline as well, if history and present trends are any guide. It is in such times as these that social stresses will boil into civil conflict, whether with authoritarianism rising in response. Now more than ever do the political culture and the popular zeitgeist need the leadership and values of the Green Party. Coda. Is the Green Party a socialist party? It partakes of the same spirit of democratic idealism and always has. The democratic principle must be extended to economic decision-making, for otherwise, ultimately, there can be no political democracy. The United States' present damnable condition illustrates just how egregiously democracy fails when the real levers of power are held by an unaccountable owner class rather than by the people. Our existing economic planks were written with this understanding. Workplace and production decisions must be made democratically by the real stakeholders, including the workers and the communities affected. The government's own spending priorities and regulatory regimes must support this. All financial institutions must be publicly owned, along with all other municipal scale or larger institutions providing essential services, not least because they can no longer be run for profit. Beyond this, however, we must admit that the Green Party is not a socialist party, not in the sense in which that term has historically been understood. The world we are headed to is a new one, deindustrialized, deglobalized, as wonderfully diverse both culturally and politically as present-day global commercial society is depressingly uniform. A fire is sweeping the garden, and afterward new things will grow. No one will tell them how. All right, there we go. Let's see. Parker, Ed, Paul, Benarubber. Okay, guys, my voice needs a little rest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a Zoom call. I will post the details here in the chat. And if multiple of you wanted to log in and talk to each other on the stream, that'd be awesome. So, Zoom. Dryland Fish. Sorry, I didn't mention you. Oh, I'm looking on the wrong screen. I've got everything over here. Let's see. New meeting. Audio only. All right, how do we start it? Freaking Zoom. All right. I'll go to the website.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Gentlemen, talk amongst yourselves. I mean, you have been, obviously. But if anybody wants to join the Zoom, that'll be awesome. All right. Meow meow. Meow meow. All right. In my left hand, I'm holding my iPad. I am going to use it to have a look at nasa.gov because the 7 minutes of terror have begun. Let's see, nasa.gov. Oh my God, I so hate the Apple interface. Okay. NASA Live, official stream of NASA TV. All right, parachute has deployed.
Our current velocity is 480 meters per second at an altitude.
All right. Let's see. Oh, admit. Paul's here. Hey, Paul.
What's up, K-Mo?
Well, I just read a long piece. I had been warned at the beginning that it was long, but I went for it anyway. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm hanging in there.
Are you at home?
Yeah, I'm at home today. There's no driving.
Do you have electricity? You must. You're talking to me.
Yeah.
Well, you could be on your phone, I suppose.
So we got power last night at about 6, and it's been on ever since. So that's pretty cool.
Right on. Right on. Yeah, I've seen all the videos, not all, but some of the videos of like people living in apartments in Texas with water just pouring out of their ceilings. I guess that's from broken pipes or something.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because nothing here is winterized.
Right. Why would it be?
Yeah, right. Temperatures rarely. I mean, there's some years where we don't even freeze, and so like for me, all my plumbing, like my water well and everything, all of the pipes are exposed on the surface, and like all the pipes under the house are exposed, so you have to constantly drip your plumbing so that it doesn't freeze. And what was happening is that so many people were dripping their pipes, and the city's municipal system was losing power, that it lost pressure, and people's pipes started freezing and busting all over the place.
Yep. I of course followed the the debacle of right wingers claiming that it was the wind turbines that caused all this trouble. Oh, Paul, you're muted.
Right. Yeah. No. That's just a big deflection. You see, it's been long. Multiple administrations of neoliberal policies that don't want to put money towards things like this. There's been a lot of deregulation of utilities and things.
Right on. Now, what have we got here? Matt Weiner, a name I don't recognize, has joined us. Matt, can you hear me? Huh. Well, let's see. It doesn't look like there's anyone else really here, though. Just one participant, writes Matt. Matt, the Zoom call is for voice chat, so I would suggest you stick to the YouTube chat if you just want to type. Let's see. Oh, Matt writes, sorry, don't have a mic or cam on this PC. I just came to listen. Doesn't look like there's anyone else here, though. Just one participant. Yeah, the chat is in the YouTube window, Matt. So I would suggest. How did you even see that there was a Zoom meeting here?
Must have been from the YouTube chat.
Yeah, but he wasn't participating in the YouTube chat. Anyway, hey Matt, into the Zoom chat, I will paste the link to the active chat where everybody else is. There you go. Actually, no, that's Restream. Let's go to YouTube. All right. Ignore that link I just posted, Matt. Here you go. That's where you'll find the other participants. So, all right.
Yeah, I could continue to talk about snowpocalypse if you want.
Please. Please do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So like it took me several days of like prepping to get ready for this. And like I had to build like basically a makeshift shelter over the well house and put several layers of like blankets and plastic and stuff because man, it was like I think it was like 6 degrees on Monday morning and super windy. And we've had like several inches of snow and ice. And we like snow just stopped falling and we probably got like 4 more inches on top of it. And they're looking at thawing tomorrow.
Wow.
But this has been a complete week of sub-freezing temperatures and multiple winter storms. It's just unprecedented and it's just been insane.
And here I am basically in Canada, and it got above freezing briefly yesterday, and today it's in the high 20s, which is warm for around here, particularly compared to recently. So you guys are getting stuff that, we're not even matching way up north. Oh, I'm seeing photographic imagery from Mars. Awesome. So everybody in the NASA control room was standing up and clapping and, backslapping and whatnot. So apparently the 7 minutes of terror ended with a happy note.
Parker's on.
Hey, Parker. Still connecting to audio, I think.
Hey, I don't have the YouTube chat up because I can't use that much bandwidth at home. So
okay.
Just to let you know.
No worries. Oh, I actually haven't been looking at it, so I should glance over there. See what folks are saying. Oh, wow. No, I've missed a lot in the chat. Let's see. Mushroom Mike was here, at least for a time. Ed says, I agree with Kurzgesagt that it would be better to start the Common Era at the beginning of the last ice age. Right. So instead of being in 2021, we'd be in, what, 12,021? Is that the proposed scheme? I think it is. Just put a 1 in front of the existing 4-digit year number. Yeah, so Ed says, i.e. that we are now in about the year 1200 CE. Yeah. Mike says, hola, where is the drawing today? I have not even picked up the stylus, Mike. The drawing session shall begin soon after the reading of this article, says Edward. Well, that was the idea. It didn't exactly happen that way. That is speculation, that the dinosaur killing space rock is not as destructive as human impact. Yeah, I don't buy that. I mean, I think that the dinosaur killing space rock was profoundly destructive and happened in an instant.
Hello.
Hey, Parker, what up?
Hey there. Not much. Just putting off doing things, I guess.
Yeah, me too. Let's see. Dryland Fish says, still iced in here. Appreciate the reading as I tromp around to chores in the snow. Right on.
Can't hear Paul.
Paul is here. He's muted right now, but I bet he'll chime in.
What's up, Parker?
Hey, Paul.
Yeah, I stay on mute. This is my kitchen, but it also doubles as an office and a puppy jungle gym. So what's going on? So when things start to get rowdy, I hit mute.
I would love to hear some puppy rambunctiousness.
Oh, man.
My cat would not like it so much, but she's off doing her old cat thing, which is sleeping. Let's see.
Yeah, I read this morning in an opinion in the Wall Street Journal where they're still blaming wind power. They were in the editorial. It was an editorial opinion piece, and very disappointed. I've been an admirer of the Texas electrical system since it has been adding renewables at a rate higher than anyone else.
Yeah, and for strictly economic motivations too, I think.
Mostly. I mean, there was the government, there's a government subsidy, but mostly.
Sorry, Paul, I cut you off.
Yeah, well, what happened with the energy grid was a complete lack of planning and misallocation of funds. There's plenty of money to winterize, natural gas power plants, which they didn't and went offline. And, there's places all around the world and, northern latitudes that have wind power and they work just fine. So it was just a complete lack of planning and action.
Right.
And, it's been the exact same response to COVID. They've, kind of hung everybody out to dry. And then there's a natural disaster and it's 5 degrees and they cut everybody's power. And then they blame renewable energy. It's insane.
I don't know. I mean, if people in Texas had said, okay, we're going to spend all this money to winterize all our power plants for below freezing, I feel like politicians would be like, you're wasting money. This is ridiculous.
Yeah. And, obviously in hindsight, they would have been wrong to say so. But in the moment, I don't think I could have blamed them.
Yeah. I mean, the last time it got this cold, from what I hear, was in 1989.
Which is within all of our lifetimes, I think. So it's not like it's a 1,000-year event.
How much time do you really need to winterize things? I mean, we've been knowing about it for a good week. I have had time to winterize as best as I could. I mean,
yeah, but I don't know what it takes to winterize a thermal power plant, or a wind turbine. I have no idea what that involves.
Or a natural gas pipeline.
True, but come on, it's something that they should consider whenever you have so many people, especially, so many sick people. I don't know, it's just obvious that the concern isn't about people, it's about money once again.
Yeah, but people also care about having cheap power too. It's not only the corporations who care about the money, it's also people that pay their bills too. And of course it would be a small amount, but still, I
mean, we're talking about winterization of facilities. We're not talking about building brand new, facilities.
Right. Yeah. And we don't know what exactly that involves, but they're putting up wind turbines and and gas-fired power plants as fast as they can, and bless them for it, because die coal, die.
Right, and it's so it's abundant here. They just flare it most of the time. Might as well put it to use.
Hey,
of course,
Paul.
I also.
What's up, man?
As you guys are talking, I'm getting caught up in the chat, so I'm reading some of your comments as you're talking. And you mentioned watching the Caspian Report with your wife. I like that. I really enjoy that channel, Caspian Report. But then you wrote, what is this Peak Oil? Is that some new oil company?
Yeah, I was trolling a little bit.
Fill up your car at Peak Oil.
Yeah. And Parker, you watch Caspian Report too. You wrote, I did read on Reddit, if Shirvan has a bias, it's a pro-Turkish one. Commenters in the recent video on Israel/Turkish water borders seem to agree.
Yeah, he presented this whole thing as like something that was going to happen, but it's just like something that somebody wrote up in Turkey. Was the whole, we're going to divide the Mediterranean and ignore Cyprus thing.
Oh yeah, I did see that one. I need to watch it again. I think I was distracted. But I recall the maps.
I don't know.
That included this weird sort of territorial bridge across the Mediterranean that linked Turkey to whom? Who was the other partner? Israel, and basically Cyprus gets no consideration. I mean the waters that it sits in belong to everybody else.
His most recent one highlights things that Turkey are doing too. I watched that this morning. Talking about connections between sub-Saharan Africa and Europe, which didn't seem as I don't know. I didn't agree with the analysis on that one. It just makes more sense for things to go around by ship than to go on roads through the Sahara.
It's a lot cheaper.
Yeah,
go ahead, Paul.
I saw that one, Parker. Like, part of the argument was that the population base is kind of in the interior of sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah,
that they're trying to exploit.
Yeah, well, yeah, Nigeria and the sort of the center of Africa is, I think, the most booming population area.
Yeah, there's always so many layers to those analyses.
Nigeria is interesting to me because they are English speaking, so you can kind of there's an opportunity to watch them and their media environment in theory, because they have a language that's the same. I watch one Nigerian YouTuber that has a connection to this guy in Britain, which is one of my favorite channels, called Atomic Shrimp. And he does a variety of videos, types. He has his most popular ones are scam baiting type videos, but he also does little crafty things and food things. But oftentimes with the scam baiting ones, the adversary that's trying to scam is in Nigeria. So this one guy in Nigeria, he watched him because he was like pissed off at the scammers, and so he sort of found this guy's channel, and they sort of made up, developed a relationship, and the Atomic Shrimp is cooking Nigerian food, and Baba Tunde, the guy in Nigeria, he's cooking English food. It's a very wholesome connection. Africa Every Day is the channel that he started, and Atomic Shrimp is the guy in the south of England.
Map, or I just looked at the map.
Yeah, I've watched I don't know, probably a third of those. They're
What do
really
you think?
good.
Yeah, I agree. And they, it's all done with Google Maps and Google Earth. I guess there's a little bit of like stock footage every now and again, but mostly he's just really just looking at the map. I mean, clearly he's doing other research, so he knows where to look on the map and what to look for. But he's making great use of that, that available resource. Did you watch the one on Baltimore?
Did I watch the one on Baltimore? I don't think so.
Ah, it's well worth it. What's the name of that channel? Do you know? Something we should share with the
Michael
rest.
Beach?
Yes. Beach, I think.
Yeah.
Or is it
There's
EE?
another guy. There's another guy that I saw that makes extensive use of Google Earth in his videos. What is it? IBX2Cat.
IBX2Cat. Let's see.
And apparently, it's his second channel. I don't I don't think I subscribe to his first channel, but it's a geography focused channel, and he's often has little segments where he's making use of the map of Google Earth, rather.
Oh, there he is. IBX2Cat. My second channel for videos I don't want to fill up my main channel with. I have the opposite problem. My channel is gathering dust. I haven't posted anything in a long time, other than these, daily live streams.
I feel like you might be diluting your channel with the live stream content. It's like a different thing.
It is a different thing. I should start a new channel for it. It's just I've got everything set up, to exist on the existing channel. And it would be a pain to, reconfigure everything for a different channel.
Oh, by the way, and the way that I found out about Senegal and how it's like the favorite child of France in Africa is, first of all, from the channel Geography Now, which is another one of my favorite channels. And also, basically, he did Senegal. And then I realized that I actually had this bag that I got at the thrift store it's like a colorful bag that could fit like a very thin computer or papers or whatever. And it's like, says something like Senegalese, about Francophone, it's like from a conference of Francophone people. And I'm like, that is why this bag exists that I got, I don't know, 5 years ago, and that I listed for sale and wouldn't sell. But this is why this exists, is because of this, this Senegal is all fashion center, and they're like up higher. So they're like, if you're an explorer, you reach there first. And Dakar is that little peninsula, is the city on the little peninsula that sticks out from Senegal. Incidentally, I recognized that when I think it was the second meteor in The Expanse hit the Earth, it hit right by that peninsula at Dakar, Senegal. And I was like, I think that's Senegal. And I was happy with myself for my geographic knowledge.
How atypical of you as an American to have any knowledge of anything outside of your home country.
Yeah, Parker, I saw another episode following that one about it was called like France's grip on Africa, and I had no idea, but they have like a monetary block where the Bank of France controls the I guess the exchange rate or the interest rates of all these different countries' currency, and like any excuse me, any like leaders who have tried to leave the bloc have been assassinated.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't think I saw that one.
you should check it out, man. There were like 12 leaders since the 1960s who have been assassinated for trying to leave this kind of economic regime or whatever.
I remember most recently, France used their military to go into Mali and I think battle against some Islamists in the north of Mali.
Yeah, I remember that there were like a huge cache of weapons that went into the hands of jihadists after Gaddafi was, overthrown or whatever, murdered, and they went in like to Mali and took over a big portion of the country. Wasn't that what it was?
Yeah, or they tried to, but they basically got crushed after a while.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's interesting. There's like a line of, like in Nigeria, the north of the country has Muslims, and then in like the top 1/4 of it is more Muslim, and then like the lower 3/4 of it is more Christian / animist.
Yeah, the Arab influence was, the northern reaches, I guess.
In Cameroon, the French are apparently persecuting a minority English-speaking population.
Those frog bastards. I think you've just radicalized me. I'm going to be going there to fight in the underground against the French. On behalf of my Anglophone brothers. So, of course, Google is transcribing and recording everything everybody says in this stream. And I've just said that I've been radicalized and that I'm looking to fly to another part of the world to fight in some hopeless insurgency. If I lived in a place that wasn't a boring 4-hour drive for the nearest federal agent, they might come knock up my door, but as it stands, I'm sure they won't bother. So I'm drawing an ornate box. It was not my intention when I started out. Paul, you have no idea what I'm talking about because you're not looking at the stream. That's okay.
No, what's in the box, Dan?
I don't know. That's a great question. What is in the box? Let me have a look at the chat and see if anybody has it. Oh, did I kill the chat? I think I killed the chat. No, here it is. Here it is. There's nothing new in the chat, though. Where'd everybody go? All right. Benarubber, are you still around? Still in the chat? Oh, my screen's frozen. Well, here we go.
It's interesting. Like 7 people were listening to you read the article.
And about 20 will listen later. It's funny, more people take in the streams after the fact than live. But, since I do them during the middle of the workday, it's not surprising.
Yeah, if you did if you did like a marathon stream that started when you usually start but continued for like 6 or 7 hours, you could probably build up some momentum and get some listeners of yours that aren't able to usually stop by.
Well, let me put this as brutally honestly as I can. I don't have the stamina or the work ethic to do that 5 days a week.
Right.
Not to sugarcoat it at all. That's just more than I'm up for.
5 days a week would be brutal.
Yeah. But if I stopped smoking weed at night and I did this stream, just the 3-hour stream, like from 8 to 11, I'm sure a lot more people would join in. And I am just about out of weed, so the test here is to, task myself with just not replacing it,
I successfully resisted using, even though Virginia voted to legalize, which was a very good reason to celebrate, but I chose not to.
Right on. Well, here's my exercise of willpower for the week. I did walk to the grocery store today, mostly just because it was a fairly warm day, 24, 25 degrees Fahrenheit, and I needed the exercise. And while I was there, I did not buy any beer.
I was going to bring some beer to the meeting in Baltimore, the meetup.
We drank hard seltzer at that meetup. And
I have some beer that I don't drink. It's Pabst Blue Ribbon.
What are you, a hipster?
Well, okay. Here's the story with the beer. I keep an eye on my local. It's my local drugstore dumpster, and they throw away a lot of stuff. So basically, it was like right after the election. I went there like a couple days after the election, and there was so much beer. Like people were like, it seemed as though people were so excited and celebrating. They were just ripping it out of the cooler and spilling it on the floor. And of course, when one beer is busted, then automatically they'll throw the other 11 or whatever away.
Wow.
It's just gone. Yeah, that's how it goes here. I mean, there's a lot of people around here. If one of those 24 packs of water, if it gets ripped so one water falls out, they will throw the rest of the water in the dumpster, and then I will get it and I will drink it. Often.
Hear the story about the store in Portland that had to throw out a bunch of food, and people came and started dumpster diving to get the food, and the store manager called the cops, and the cops came and guarded the dumpster to make sure nobody ate that food.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But I believe it. But anyway, so I had this beer around, and my sister drinks beer, so it was like her birthday in late November. So I was like, okay, I'll just give you a bunch of half of this beer. And then the other beer just sat there, and then I gave her the other half. But she said that she didn't want the Pabst Blue Ribbon. She didn't like the Pabst Blue Ribbon. She got the Heineken. She got the Bud Light. She got the Miller. She got the Corona. She got the High Sierra. I think that was all of it. It was a lot of beer that was in the dumpster. And all those left is this Pabst Blue Ribbon. And I was thinking the perfect place I could just bring it up to some beer drinkers, you and people up in Baltimore, and they would enjoy it. But you didn't remember to loop me in.
I did not, and I do apologize.
That's okay. It's quite a chunk of gas money in the vehicle that I have, so. But it would have been fun.
Well, I don't want to rub your nose in it, but it was fun.
Camo, why are you not smoking? Is it just because you don't want to go to the store?
Say that again?
Why are you going to quit smoking?
Oh, I smoke weed in the evenings, and that marks the transition from working to not working.
Uh-huh.
And so I like to not work in the evening. But if I wanted more people to take in the stream as it's happening and possibly participate, then it would be in my best interest to do it in the evening, which means I should not smoke weed in the evening.
Oh.
So nothing more complicated than that, really.
No, yeah, I got it. That's interesting.
And as I mentioned, I'm just about out, so it's time to re-up. And my challenge is, don't re-up, because even if I'm not going to be streaming at night, I'd like to get do some writing in the evening.
Yeah, I gotcha. But hey guys, I gotta sign off because I'm done with the workday, so I'm gonna go finish up outside and call it a day.
All right. It's always good to hear from you, Paul.
Hey,
Good
thanks,
talking
man.
to you.
Likewise, Parker. I hope you guys have a great evening.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Let's have a look at the chat here. Anything going on?
Nothing in the chat.
Nothing? Well, there's lots of stuff I didn't acknowledge earlier. I see that Ben Rubber is listening to the audiobook of George Friedman's The Storm Before the Calm. I'll be interested to hear his take on that.
I'd like to hear Ben Rubber get on and go over his notes on that founding finance book that he was talking about.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he took the trouble to have notes on it, and, it's probably synthesized some stuff.
Yeah.
So that
Well,
would be
Ben Rubber, if you're still listening, wait, let's see, Bering Strait, Land World Bridge, that's from, 412. Okay, yeah, there's nothing happening in the chat now. And Ben Rubber hasn't been on since 3:52, so I don't think he's hearing us. But Ben Rubber, if you're still there, we would definitely like to hear your summation and commentary on that book. All right.
Yeah, that article you wrote, it was like he started out with the Green Party and socialism, and then he just sort of went into like the standard old like C-realm sort of worldview,
Yeah.
basically.
It's like, this sounds an awful lot like an episode of the C-Realm podcast from 2010.
Like really similar.
Yeah, well, it's drawn on the same sources. Joseph Tainer, John Michael Greer. Alrighty. Yeah, so then I think the valuable thing I took from that, and it's something I already knew, is that socialists and communists, they tend to be pretty techno-utopian. They tend to, be as allergic to talk of limits to growth as any capitalist.
It's interesting that he talked about how the newer socialists believe that now with technology and AI, maybe we can do things that we weren't able to.
Yeah, well, that's the whole zeitgeist movement, fantasy that, top-down, centralized, centrally planned economies didn't work in the past because it was too complex, but now with artificial intelligence, we can do it, which is the last thing I want to see anybody try to do with artificial intelligence. But, yeah, it will be tried, no question. Mm-hmm.
Do you follow the news on any of these AI investments that you are in on? Do you sort of watch companies at all, or do you just are you just like I want to try this and just let it go, basically?
I'm not investing in individual stocks. I'm just invested in a couple of the ARK funds, and
right.
No, I don't scrutinize, every word that Kathy Wood says, or try to second guess her choices for what's included or not included in the fund.
I had never heard of a ETF.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the initials.
Yeah, exchange traded fund. It's
right.
It's a fund that you buy and sell in the same places where you get stocks.
Yeah, I read that mutual funds are traded at the end of the day, but exchange-traded funds are traded throughout the day. But that's a new thing to me.
Yeah, it was a new thing to me just a few weeks ago.
Yeah?
Yeah.
With all this stock talk, I went in and I started Googling, like, what some companies were. Like, what is this symbol?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know these, I know that, and like 3 of them turned out to be Chinese companies. like a Chinese social media type companies, and I can't remember the other one.
Where were you looking?
And I was looking at a list of like publicly traded companies on Wikipedia, I think, and then looking and seeing ones I didn't know what it was, and just Googling it.
So the app that I use to buy and sell stock and ETFs and follow the progress doesn't let me even buy Canadian companies, much less Chinese companies. I'll put it up on screen here. And wow, the market's getting hammered today. Damn. Or at least the stocks I follow are getting hammered. Everything's red.
One that I didn't recognize was ENI, and that turns out to be the big the oil major that is out of Italy.
Oh, okay. Well, look at all this red, and the one thing that's green is Bitcoin, and it's climbing as we watch. 52,000. Look at that.
I saw on Reddit that there was a report that I think it's called BlackRock was dabbling in Bitcoin, and apparently they're like some huge fund or something. So they got that good news.
There's also a rumor of Apple thinking of dropping a bunch of money into Bitcoin. Man, look at everything's down. Tesla is, whoa, look at that, 787.
Tesla's crazy overvalued anyway.
It is, but it's falling. But all of the ARK funds are down. Even my Jets ETF is down.
Let's see. All I watch is silver, and it's holding at 27 something. Eventually, I will unload my flatware, sterling silver flatware here, and I will not watch that anymore.
Well, the flatware's got to be worth more than just its weight in silver, right?
Maybe. It doesn't seem like it. It seems like it's I went to the pawn shop and I asked him about it, and he said, "Oh, it's this one brand." And I said, "Yeah, I think." And then he looked it up and he's like, "Oh, it's this brand." Like he was no longer excited about it in terms of its value as a replacement item.
Take that from my site.
Well, I didn't take it in. I didn't want to. I wasn't gonna, give into any temptation. But I did find out he did teach me some things. Apparently, silver is sold in troy ounces, which is a little bit different than regular ounces.
I am just not interested in precious metals, and maybe it's a failing of mine, but I don't know the lingo. I don't have any strategies. I don't follow the price swings. I just not.
I wouldn't be, except I have it, and it would be good for me to learn a little bit about it, so that if I come across stuff, at the garage sales and the yard sales, I can scoop it up.
Changing the subject with no grace whatsoever. I own one share of Viacom stock, and that the Webull just gave it to me for opening an account with them. It is up 277.42% since they gave it to me.
Wow! Now, what streaming service goes along with Viacom? I wonder.
CBS All Access.
What?
CBS All Access.
Oh, huh.
Which is being retired. They're going to replace it with something else. I think they're going to call it Paramount Plus.
Paramount Plus, right? Yeah. Which hasn't been doing very well. I don't think it's been doing poorly. Like, who even knows about it? Except for the Star Trek fans.
Well, I re-upped with CBS All Access to watch the Super Bowl this year. They had the Super Bowl.
You watched the Super Bowl?
Well, I'm from Kansas City, so.
Oh, well, okay. Well, I don't know. I've drifted so far away from the Super Bowl, and I was thinking that basically liberals should be against the Super Bowl because there are people that are, giving themselves brain injuries, and that's very unethical. And then the conservatives, they've recently got very mad at the NFL, so they shouldn't be watching it either. So basically, nobody should be watching it.
And yet,
but a lot of people still do.
Well, particularly the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
It's got the big halftime show. It's got the marquee commercials for the year.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that you often get in the Super Bowl commercials, which was sorely lacking this year, was, the advanced trailers for the big movies of the summer or, the late spring. Not this year. I think there were a couple, but it's a bummer.
Have you been keeping up with the MCU, the WandaVision?
It's ridiculous. I watch WandaVision, and it's like a half-hour show, and then I watch 2.5 hours worth of different people's, recaps and analysis of it. So. And they all say pretty much the same thing, but, they have different personalities. So I'm just...
There is a lot of that recap that I have not been watching that. But one or two, I think I watched, but like...
So, because I've been watching WandaVision, I went back and I rewatched, for the first time, I'd only ever seen it once in the theater, I rewatched Age of Ultron, the second Avengers movie, and I remember being so disappointed in it when I first saw it, but it's really held up. It's one of the better Marvel movies, I think. I really enjoyed my rewatch of Age of Ultron. And that was that was a real transition point because that was the last film that what's his name, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Firefly.
Joss Whedon.
Joss Whedon, yeah, that was the last Joss Whedon Marvel film. And after that, it was the whole franchise was basically handed over to the Russo brothers. They did Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Captain America: Civil War, Avengers: Infinity War, and Avengers: Endgame. They directed all of those. Wrote and directed. So, that was really the handoff. And I thought it was a pretty graceful handoff. And yeah, the tone definitely changed after that. But that was like the culmination of phase 2 was, Avengers: Age of Ultron.
I remember looking at a chart way back when and seeing like at the end of that chart, there was Infinity War 1 and 2 and thinking, oh man, that's just like years and years away.
Yeah, it was. And those years passed as they do. Yep.
But I saw something on Reddit that says that MCU is basically releasing something like every week for the rest of the year.
On Disney Plus.
Well, there was Disney Plus, but there was also in that list Black Widow in May, which I think they're gonna do a theater release. I'm guessing they want to do that.
They've delayed that so many times already. I don't think it's going to open this year.
And then later in the year, the Eternals, which is their new group of characters. And then there was right after WandaVision, the
Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Falcon, Winter Soldier, which I want to watch, though I didn't watch the trailer.
I'll tell you the thing I'm excited about is What If. It's going to be an animated series, but it's going to be, that was a comic book that Marvel put out for years. It was what if this pivotal moment in the Marvel universe had gone differently. Like the first one I ever read was what if Rick Jones had become the Hulk? And Rick Jones is not a character in the MCU, so I guess a lot of people wouldn't remember him from the comic. But, he was present when, the reason Banner originally got exposed to the gamma radiation was because he went out to, onto the testing site because there was some clueless idiot kid who was out there who was going to get irradiated. And Banner got there just in time to push the kid, Rick Jones, into a trench, and then he himself took the full brunt of the gamma rays from the bomb and became the Hulk. And so the first of those I ever read was, what if Rick Jones had become the Hulk? And there were many, many such, really cool what if stories that they explored like that. And now they're going to do it in animated form, and the animation looks good. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, that's interesting that is appealing to you, because looking at that list, that was the one that I was like, I don't care about this. I don't know anything about this.
Yeah, and that's the one I'm excited about.
Hypothetical stories that, I don't know, it's like, do they really count?
And in one of them, it's what if T'Challa had become Star-Lord? I think that's the first one they're going to do. And what's his name? Chadwick Boseman, who played Black Panther and who is now dead. He did the voice work for that before he died. So he has one more appearance left. One more performance in the can.
Yeah, I really wasn't too excited about the whole start of WandaVision with the comedy.
Yeah, the first 3 episodes, they gave you nothing to tie to the rest of the MCU, and it's like, okay, this is kind of cute, but it's not 3 episodes cute. You better clue us into what's going on pretty quick, or I'm out of here. And at the end of the 3rd episode, we got just a taste. That's when Wanda pushed what's her name, Monica, completely out of her house through several walls and then across town and out of the barrier. And then we see, all the S.W.O.R.D. agents are just standing outside this big barrier, waiting and monitoring, waiting to address the situation in any way they can. And it's like, finally we see that this connects to something. Yeah, that was much too long. Like, those first 3 episodes should have been 1 episode.
And then you see on the, how long, the rest of the show is, and then, the last 5 minutes is credits.
Or longer, because, they show you credits for every language into which it's been dubbed. You get the credits again. And the first 2 or 3 episodes, I sat through all those credits waiting for a post-credit scene.
Oh, right, because it's Marvel.
Right, there's always a post-credit scene. No, there's not. Yeah. This is stuff that a portion of the C-Realm audience absolutely has no patience for whatsoever, and they just hate it when I talk about this stuff.
That's interesting, because I'm a person that basically, for a while, did not listen to the C-Realm because I was only listening to you on the Z-Realm, so only pop culture stuff.
You're one of those, huh? Like you and Mushroom Mike. Mushroom Mike, he created the intro for that show.
That was a good intro.
Yeah. It mixes elements of, the famous speech by the radio announcer in Night of the Living Dead, talking about how the dead are returning to life and attacking the living, but the music is from Return of the Living Dead, which was the first comedic take on the zombie apocalypse.
I just recently I was watching this reaction channel. How did I get into it? Oh, it was The Boys. So that's a great one for watching reactions.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the pop culture shows that I watch are the same ones that Eric Voss watches. So he did breakdowns for all episodes of The Boys. He does breakdowns for all episodes of all of the the Marvel movies and TV shows, and he did breakdowns for every episode of The Mandalorian. So all the shows that I watch, he watches. Like in those rare years when we have new episodes of Rick and Morty, he does an episode for each Rick and Morty episode. So yeah, I see a lot of his stuff, and it hasn't happened yet, but I'm sure I'll see that he's doing videos about something that I haven't watched, and I'll go and watch it just so I can appreciate his videos.
The one I was watching was this guy TBR Schmidt, and he starts out with the first few ones with the boys, but then he does like old movies with his wife. So it's a couple that are watching. They've recently got into Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. They watched Total Recall and Predator, and they're basically coming in blind. So it's fun to see that, and he edits it down pretty well. So I was looking at the movies that they were reacting to, and most of them I recognized, but one of them was Train to Busan, which I had not heard of.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I like all these other movies that they're watching. I will watch that. And that was just like a month or so ago, and I was blown away.
Yeah, that's a marvelous film. Everything just works.
I usually,
in that movie,
if something has subtitles, I'm just like, I don't like it. I'm just like, I'm just not used to it. I'm audio focused.
Yeah.
So but it did not bother me at all in that one.
Yeah, well, the thing with reading subtitles is you can't look away from the screen. You can't look at your phone. You can't, look to talk to somebody else. I mean, you have to have your eyes on the screen, otherwise you don't understand the dialogue. But with a film like that, you can't really look away from the screen anyway. It's just so compelling and captivating.
That's, yeah.
Yeah, I watched with my oldest son when he was here that German Netflix show, Dark.
Dark? I tried to watch that. I tried to watch that twice. It just did not catch me.
The first episode is really unappealing. It's really hard to get into. But if you push on for like 2 or 3 episodes, then it really starts to grab hold of you. But that first episode is just a slog and a chore.
Yeah, and I switched back and forth from dubbed to subtitles, and I don't know. I think I watched like 3 episodes or so, and it just didn't catch me. And it was partially because I watched it like the first episode, and then like months and months later, I tried to watch the second episode, and
No, yeah, that's not going to work. I mean, watching them, like binging them. My son and I would be sitting here saying, now, wait a second. Now, who's he related to? Now, who's his wife? And he's who in the other world? And what? And, we tried to do it. We tried to watch it without any cheat sheets, any extra help, and that didn't last. Eventually, we had to go and, consult the extra materials, supplementary materials. But it's encouraging that a show that is that demanding of the audience's attention, and it would be less demanding if you spoke German, but it's a very demanding show in terms of what it expects you to remember and piece together.
Yeah, people just rave on that show on
I like it quite
on Reddit. So yeah, I'm not gonna say that it's bad, but I don't know. I don't think that I'm gonna try again.
Fair enough. It's complete though. I mean, once you get to the end, you're at the end. It's finished. There will be no further seasons. It is a complete work.
I'm considering watching Band of Brothers.
Oh, I've heard good things. I'm not really a World War II kind of guy, but
yeah, I wasn't really interested in. I'm not really that big on war films, but I recently watched a couple war films that were really good. So
what were they?
1917.
Okay, I've heard good things. I intend to watch that one. I just haven't gotten to it yet.
And Saving Private Ryan.
Oh, you never saw that?
No.
Mm-hmm.
So TBR Schmidt, they got me into those two because they were just like, oh, we're reacting to that, so it's probably good. And then they're watching Band of Brothers, so maybe I will watch it. But if I start watching that, I'm gonna probably have to start. I'll probably eat it up in like 2 days, so that's like 5 hours a day. So now, it's like
I found myself doing the thing. I've heard other people report this phenomenon as well. And last night it just reached an absurd level. I went to Netflix, and I'm always thinking it's time to cancel Netflix because I never watch it. But maybe I'll go and find something, So I went to Netflix and I just, scroll. And, it shows you the same thing again and again and again. I was like, no. So I quit out of that. I went to Amazon Prime, scroll. I started to watch a movie. I got like 10 minutes into it. I'm like, nah, I'm not going to give this another hour, 2 hours of my life. And then I went to, what else do I have? Netflix, Amazon. I went to Disney Plus. Scroll. Nah. And then I went back to YouTube. It's all I ever watch really is YouTube, unless it's one of the few shows for which I keep those other services. Like, I have Disney, or not Disney. I have Amazon Prime just because for the free shipping. So if I'm not watching anything on Prime Video, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. 4th episode of Resident Alien is out.
Oh, cool! I'll watch that tonight.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed that. I mean, I like Alan Tudyk a lot, but I think it's a well executed show, and I like the fact that he's not like some savior or some saintly heroic figure. He's very morally ambiguous.
Well, he's like, I need to get around to killing everyone.
And I will eventually, but in particular, I hate this little kid. But I'm not going to kill him in front of his mom.
Yeah, Netflix is so disappointing lately. It's like, come on, what. Now,
what I like about Netflix is that they're pouring almost all of their profits back into new original content. But it's not stuff that's aimed at me, apparently.
I'm still kind of bitter at them for canceling the OA. I really thought that was delightfully weird.
It was. I watched the first season. I didn't see the second season.
The first season, it got a huge backlash because of the ending, which I thought was kind of ambiguous, and I liked it. I didn't mind the ambiguity of it, and I didn't think that it was necessarily silly because it was interpretive dance.
I enjoyed that scene.
I've read that there's some people that are into dance that are just like all about that.
Oh yeah.
And then the second season was even better. And weirder, but then it ends on a cliffhanger and they canceled it.
So
but I think that the momentum of the show and the view numbers, it never got past the ending of the first season. I think that there was so much conflict about the reaction online that probably it prevented growth of the show, and ultimately because of their algorithms killed it.
I enjoyed the Marco Polo Netflix series.
I think I watched the first episode of that, but it didn't catch me.
Well, it was quite lavish, and it was shot on location, and it had some big stars in it, and it was just too expensive. But they did 2 seasons, and I would watch a third if they did a third, but it just doesn't pay for itself.
Did you watch the Disenchantment, the one that was by the Simpsons guy?
Matt Groening.
I did not watch.
I watched the first season. I didn't watch the second. It was okay.
Yeah, I haven't watched that, but I wonder about it. It's all right. Okay.
It's not bad, but yeah. I mean, it's no Futurama. Now, there's another Netflix show. The tone is different, but it's a similar genre. It's The Dragon Prince. It's quite good, and particularly good in terms of the character design. I really love the characters in that. The look of them. And it's
one show that I saw was For All Mankind. Have you heard of this?
No, I have not.
Okay, probably because it's an Apple show. I downloaded it from the internet.
What's it called again?
Apple. for all mankind. And the premise is what if the space race in the 60s went a different way and caused the US and the Soviet Union to push on and have a moon base and continue with the space race.
Oh, it's a Ronald D. Moore show. Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, right on.
And so it's retro. It starts out in the 60s with and it starts out with in the actual history, but then it splits off pretty quickly, and it moves up through the 70s. And this next season, that's going to be released like any day now, or maybe next month. I don't know. Soon they're going to start releasing the second season of it. It's going to be in the 80s.
Oh.
And it didn't have quite as much space stuff as I would have liked, but it was still pretty good. It was still, I still recommend it. The sort of historical, retro, it's very well done, this in the, time period type of thing. Yeah, that was just recently recommended to me, and it's like, oh, I'll watch this because the next season is coming out right soon. But they're releasing it week by week, which is disappointing for me to read. I was hoping that they would just release all of it.
I learned something speaking of Ronald D. Moore, because he was the showrunner for the reimagined Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
I read something, it was hilarious, about the original Battlestar Galactica. Originally, the Cylons weren't supposed to be robots. They were supposed to be like these lizard-like aliens. But because it was going to be a TV show, and the script had the heroes shooting a whole bunch of them, that was quite the body count. To get around network censorship on violence, they made the aliens into robots instead. But the Cylons being this cybernetic race was not integral to the initial idea for the show.
Ronald D. Moore, he did a great podcast about Battlestar Galactica as it was happening.
Really?
He would be there like, I have this whiskey and I have this cigar and I'm relaxing now, and this is what happened in this episode.
Okay, I think that strikes a familiar chord. I think I heard about that.
Then the other one he's famous for lately is Outlander, which I haven't watched.
Yeah, I will admit I haven't watched it for very personal reasons. My now ex-wife was really into the books that's based on, so it's like that's her thing.
Okay, you had a negative association with it.
Yeah. I hear they're going to reboot Battlestar Galactica, and I really don't want them to.
Yeah, they should
just leave it alone.
Wait another 20 years.
Yeah, it's too soon. Too soon.
Well, one thing about the Netflix shows is that I think hurts them is their reluctance to, or their lack of, sort of continuing names of shows. Like they're not doing a lot of sort of like, this is a continuation of this show, or this is a reimagining of this show. It's a lot of like new titles.
Well, I like that. I like that they're doing
I think it's good. But I think it hurts. I actually think it hurts them.
But this way, all the money that they spend on content is actually going to produce the content. It's not just they're not just paying to license the IP.
Yeah, I mean it's good. But
Amazon spent like $1 billion just on the rights to do Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, or whatever they're doing. I think they're doing something, in an earlier age.
Yeah. I'm not excited about that.
Oh, it's going to
Amazon
suck.
project.
It's going to suck so hard. But it'll be one of those train wrecks that you can't look away from.
I was comparing them in my mind to the whole Marvel thing that's going on with Disney Plus.
Mm-hmm.
Is the sort of the comparison I was making in my head.
there's lots of good reasons to hate Disney, but they're killing it with the Marvel stuff, I have to say.
There's just one YouTuber, The Handyman, who does like handyman fix-it content, and he occasionally talks about the stocks he's in, and he's very excited about Disney. He's invested in it, and he's bullish, about it.
Well, I mean, they're having a hard time now because all their parks are closed, but if they're not closed, they're at minimal capacity. But I think Disney's got a bright future.
I think they have a good system. I don't know how they do their writing, but with the Marvel films, and they seem to have a system somehow that they are able to get at least a decent story. Nothing really horrible. So I don't know if they have like a team of people that make like 3 different versions and they pick one, or they do it iteratively. But I feel like they have some kind of what do you call it? Conveyor belt of
assembly line
writers. Assembly line, yeah.
I don't know how they do it. I mean, they've got source material to draw upon, but they change it. They combine storylines from the comics, and they just make reference to them. All right, so I've spent a whole bunch of time on this weird box. I don't know what this is about.
It's a pretty good-looking box. Oh, Ben Rubber is back.
Oh, let's see. Let me look at the comments. Ben Rubber, you got to bring us back to intellectual topics, man. We have devolved into popular TV, and we're even talking about stuff on Disney Plus. So save us. Let's see. I visited the Liam Sullivan channel, the Muffins guy. He's still making some pretty funny videos. I don't know who that is. I got into Cobra Kai.
Muffins, literally?
I don't know. I got into Cobra Kai, but the lull waiting for season 3 has been hard to get back into. I watched the first few episodes of Cobra Kai, and I liked it well enough, but I didn't finish the first season. But, people whose opinions I respect swear by it, so eventually I'll watch it. I just don't ever feel like watching it.
It's fun. I think the premise is it's creaking under some weight with season 3.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. It's a delicate balance that they've got on that show, being like kind of silly but serious, and it works. But it's to continue on. It's getting more absurd.
Okay.
I enjoyed it, but I don't think that the quality for season 3 is as good as the first 1 or 2.
Well, I have no clue as to what season 2 is all about. I stopped when he had just rented the storefront, to have his Cobra Kai studio in, and he's got 2 students. He's got the original kid who glommed onto him, and then there's this, I think, chunky black girl who became basically the second student. And then Danny LaRusso was driving by and saw that the Cobra Kai store was there and, freaked out. And I think that's the last episode I saw. That's pretty early in season 1. All right. Cobra Kai. I do love just Karate Kid Part 1. I mean, I know there was a sequel, at least one sequel and a remake, but that first film had just a definite ending. It's like we build up to this climactic moment, and in the last possible instant, the hero pulls victory, snatches victory from the jaws of defeat, and boom, it's over. Except there is the scene in the parking lot afterwards, outside. Or was that in the second one?
No, it was in the first one.
It was in the first one? Okay, yeah, where the Cobra Kai teacher, beats up on who's the main character in Cobra Kai?
the kid,
Yeah, whatever his name
the
was.
Karate Kid, and Miyagi. I don't know.
No, he beats up on his own student, the one who lost the tournament.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And Mr. Miyagi comes out and puts the slap down on Cobra Kai Sensei. But really, that film, it had a firm conclusion. Nothing else was needed. But then, here we are, 30 years later, and time goes on, and Danny LaRusso, who was, the underdog hero, is now a dick. He's now super successful, and he takes himself way too seriously. And even when he's trying to be nice, he's kind of a supercilious asshole. And our villain from the original is this very pitiable character, whose life has gone absolutely nowhere, and he's living, getting drunk to the point of passing out alone in his apartment and waking up the next day, carpet impression on his face. You have great, maybe some contempt, but also, a lot of sympathy for this character. So I love the role reversal there. But, it's not that simple. It's not just let's flip the switch and make the bad guy the good guy and vice versa. I mean, life goes on, life is complicated, people are complicated, and, none of us are getting any younger. I just love that.
The later season actually really sort of expands upon and has connections to the second movie.
Which takes place in Okinawa, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have just the vaguest memories of the second movie.
Yeah.
I remember that Mr. Miyagi had a little drum that he would, twirl between his two palms, and that informed Daniel's, killer move for that film.
Right.
But that's about it. And there was a love interest, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the love interest, actually the same actor makes an appearance eventually in the show. Actress.
She was Japanese, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Or more specifically, she was Okinawan.
All right. Well, I'm logging off.
Yeah, it's after 5. I'm done. Stream is over. All right.
Good chat. I will talk to you later.
Thanks for calling in. Talk to you later.
All right. Bye.
Oh, I should stop.